Chapter 1852, Strange Movement, 3, Ji-yun softly replied. Actually, he really wanted to say, why can't I see how cute this little fox is? It seemed that from the moment he saw this little fox, this little fellow had never given him a good look. Silly boy, what are you, for? Hurry up and take your kanji away. I want meat, not kanji. Baby gently raised his little chin and said like a master. There's meat in the porridge. Didn't I say that I put a lot of chicken in it? Ji-yun was still trying his best to promote his kanji. I don't eat the meat in the porridge. Go get me some roasted meat. The treasure ordered Ji-yun as if it was a matter of course. However, when Ji-tao and Ji-woo heard this, they didn't know what to say. They could only remain silent. But there's only porridge and no roasted meat. Ji-yun was in a difficult position. He thought to himself, this little fox is really difficult to serve. He had never heard of anyone eating barbecued meat so early in the morning. I don't care, I just want to eat roasted meat. Baby deliberately said in a difficult tone. All right then. Wait a minute. Ji-yun was helpless. He resigned himself to his fate and could only go roast meat for the fox. Woo, did he have it easy? When his precious baby got to eat the roasted meat as he wished, he was satisfied and no longer looked for trouble with Ji-yun. However, it was clearly impossible for Ji-yun to please him so easily. Not long after they had breakfast, they were hesitating about whether to continue on their way when Jo-kun and the other two, who were pale-faced, walked out of their tents unsteadily. After seeing Ji-yun and the other two, everything that had happened last night was suddenly ignited again. Damn it! What did you three do to us? Who are you? Jo-kun shouted angrily when he saw Ji-yun and the other two. We didn't do anything, Ji-yun blinked his eyes, his face filled with grievance and confusion. You didn't do anything? Then how did we get the runs? Jo-kun asked with a red face. His liver ached at the thought of it. Not only did Ji-yun and the other two embarrass them, but they also caused them to lose their lives. How could he not hate them? Whenever he thought about the unknown future, he would feel lost. However, if he didn't have a good life, then Ji-yun and the other two wouldn't have a good life either. How would we know? Ji-yun pouted, feeling extremely wronged. That's right. You guys ate something bad and now you're blaming it on us. Ji-tao also glared at Jo-kun and the other two in dissatisfaction. What do you mean we ate something bad? We didn't eat anything else other than Ji-yun's roasted chicken yesterday. Who else could it be if not him? Jo-kun shouted at the top of his lungs, while Zhou-li and Zhou-cheng also glared at Ji-yun and the other two menacingly. They should have gotten to the bottom of this matter last night, but they were busy destroying the corpses at that time, so they had delayed it until now. Are you sure you've never eaten anything else? You haven't even had a sip of water? Ji-woo asked suspiciously. Then, he continued, you said that the problem was caused by eating the chicken we roasted, but we ate the chicken yesterday too. How are we fine? As soon as Ji-woo asked his question, Jo-kun and the other two were immediately at a loss for words. After a long while, Jo-kun had a flash of inspiration and said, we didn't eat the same batch. The three of us ate the roasted meat first, while you ate the roasted meat later. That's why there's no problem with yours. Oh, really? However, if I remember correctly, 4 of them were roasted and the 3 of you ate 1 each. As for the other one, it was eaten by this little fox. It didn't have diarrhea. Ji-woo pointed at the treasure with a faint smile. He couldn't help but secretly rejoice that there was a witness. Otherwise, they would have been unable to clear their names even if they jumped into the Yellow River. MMH. The chicken tasted pretty good. I didn't have a stomachache. Seeing that he was involved in the matter, Baby had no choice but to come out and prove that he was fine. Why, you're with them, so of course you'll side with them. Zhou-li immediately said. You're wrong. I'm not with them. She's my master. Baby pointed at Leng Ruoxue. Then, He looked at his master with an aggrieved expression, as if he was saying, who wants to be on the same side as that silly kid? The treasure is my beastie, don't be mistaken. Leng Ruoxue squinted her eyes and said in a slightly displeased tone. You idiot! Who allowed you to speak such nonsense? Upon seeing that, Zhou Kun smacked Zhou Li's head hard and growled in a low voice. Then, he smiled at Leng Ruoxue and said, hee hee. Miss Leng, Zhou Li didn't mean it that way. Please don't misunderstand. We only suspect that Ji Yun and the others have something to do with this, but we have no suspicions about your little beastie. That's good. Leng Ruoxue smiled faintly, and Zhou Kun was immediately captivated by her. He was stunned, and a suspicious liquid flowed out of the corner of his mouth. However, what my baby said is true. Nothing happened to it after eating the chicken yesterday, so you'd better think about it carefully and see if it had eaten anything else. Leng Ruoxue then suggested. Just as Leng Ruoxue finished her sentence, Zhou Li suddenly shouted in shock, Young Master Kun. I remember, we seemed to have eaten yesterday afternoon. However, Zhou Li was interrupted by Zhou Kun before he could finish his sentence. What nonsense are you talking about? Where did we eat at noon? Zhou Kun glared at Zhou Li and roared with resentment. Arg! Never eaten before. I've remembered it wrong. Zhou Li also knew that he had said the wrong thing and quickly changed his words. However, when Ji Yun and the other two heard their conversation, they all smiled without saying a word. However, the slightly mocking expression on their faces made Zhou Kun's heart burn with anger. Damn it! What are you looking at? I've never seen a beautiful man before. Zhou Kun was furious. You can be considered a handsome man. Upon hearing this, Ji Tao laughed. Although Zhou Kun was not ugly, he was still a distance away from being a handsome man. This had a lot to do with the Zhou family's inheritance, because the Zhou family's appearance was not very outstanding in the divine realm. How am I not considered a handsome man? Zhou Kun glared at him with his eyes that were spewing fire and said fiercely, fuck. He actually dared to say that about him in front of a beauty, how preposterous. At this moment, although he was still a little worried about the punishment from the Divine Master's estate, his lust also prevailed. Therefore, he was determined to get Leng Ruoxue. No matter how I look at you, you can't be considered a handsome man. Ji Tao sized up Zhou Kun and told the truth. Zhou Kun was so infuriated by Ji Tao that he was speechless. If it were not for the fact that he still wanted to maintain a good image in front of Leng Ruoxue, he would have definitely taught Ji Tao a lesson. Stop arguing. Young Master Zhou, regarding the fact that you had diarrhea the entire night, I am deeply sympathetic. However, you do not have any evidence to prove that this matter was man-made. So, I hope that you both will stop arguing over this matter. Since this matter has already happened, you'd better think about how to deal with it. If my guess is correct, the God Lord's estate will definitely punish you for this matter. Leng Ruoxue reminded them earnestly and couldn't help but laugh in her heart. I'm afraid that Zhou Kun and the other two will have a hard time this time. He probably wouldn't have the time to have any ideas about her, right? Leng Ruoxue's words made Zhou Kun feel extremely touched. Woo, a beauty is still the best. She was considerate and understanding, always thinking about him. He had decided that he would treat this beauty well in the future. Zhou Kun decided in his heart. However, it was fortunate that Leng Ruoxue did not know what Zhou Kun was thinking. If she had known that Zhou Kun had made up his mind because of her words, she would probably be depressed to death. Seeing that Zhou Kun's eyes were suddenly filled with tears, Leng Ruoxue thought that Zhou Kun was frightened by the name of the Divine Lord's estate. She did not know that he was actually crying because he was touched. Young Master Zhou, the matter might not be as serious as you think, so you don't have to be too afraid. Leng Ruoxue consoled him perfunctorily. If the God Lord's estate wants to pursue this matter, I will admit my mistakes to them. Zhou Kun said very sincerely, then continued, Miss Leng, thank you for your concern. I'm so happy. Upon hearing Zhou Kun's words, Leng Ruoxue could tell that something was amiss. A few drops of cold sweat hung on her forehead as she secretly complained, "Did I say something? Why did Zhou Kun have such a reaction?" However, she did not want to pay too much attention to Zhou Kun. Hence, she changed the topic and suggested, "Since young Master Zhou and the other two are fine, let's set off." "Yes, yes." Ji Yun was the first to raise both hands in agreement. As long as it was something Ruoxue said, he would agree to it. "Let's go," Zhou Kun said, unwilling to be outdone. Although his body was still a little weak at the moment, he could not lose to this useless coward. Just like that, the group of 7 continued on their way. However, this time, Zhou Kun kept a respectful distance from the food that Ji Yun and the other 2 had brought him. However, they still had diarrhea as usual while eating the food that he had brought. In this way, the truth was revealed. It was the food they brought that wasn't clean. After Ji Yun found out about it, she even deliberately ran to Zhou Kun, who was exhausted from diarrhea, and said with a wronged look, "It's really none of my business, right? Do you know that you've wronged me now?" His words made Zhou Kun so angry that he gritted his teeth and did not manage to curse at him. After dragging them for 3 days in a row, Zhou Kun and the other 2 were unable to move no matter what. Out of desperation, Leng Ruoxue and the others had no choice but to stay with them temporarily. At this time, it had been almost half a month since they entered the special space. However, apart from the Ji and Zhou families who had temporarily stopped fighting, they had not seen any other participants from the other families. All of a sudden, the earth trembled and the mountains shook. The special space began to shake violently. Chapter 1853, The Barrier Shattered. 1. At that moment, the special space was distorted, and the trees and rocks were shaking to different degrees. Leng Ruoxue and the others who were in the special space felt the unusual violent shaking. They quickly pulled on the fixed objects beside them, such as trees and hills, to prevent themselves from falling to the ground. But at the same time, a deafening shriek suddenly rang out. "Arg! Damn it! Quickly let go of me!" The person who screamed was Zhou Kun. The reason why he screamed so loudly was because Ji Yun had used him as a tree stump and was holding him tightly. As for Zhou Kun, he was swaying and finally plopped. With a sound, he fell on the ground gloriously. After the violent shaking came to a temporary end, Zhou Kun tried his best to get up and glared at Ji Yun as he roared, "Fuck! You coward, why are you pulling me? There's a tree over there, you know that." As soon as he finished shouting, the special space shook violently again. He was not prepared for it and fell down again. Upon seeing this, Leng Ruoxue and the rest snickered in their hearts. On the other hand, Ji Yun revealed a pure and innocent expression as she looked at Zhou Kun and said, "I didn't mean to grab you. You were the closest to me, so it was my instinct to grab you." After saying that, he even shrank his neck, as if Zhou Kun would beat him up at any time. "But you can't grab my chest." "Fuck. You can grab anywhere. Why are you grabbing onto her chest?" Zhou Kun was furious. His chest was very sensitive, and he actually had a reaction after being grabbed by Ji Yun. This was the main reason why he was flustered and exasperated. Fuck. The one who caught him was a real man. Although this man was a little sissy, his gender was unquestionable. I didn't do it on purpose. Besides, I've already caught you, what else do you want to do? Do you want me to take responsibility for you? I'm telling you, I like women. So, you'd better not blame me. Ji Yun spoke in a serious tone. Upon hearing his words, Zhou Kun's face turned livid with anger. He trembled all over and pointed at Ji Yun, unable to say a complete sentence. However, when Leng Ruoxue, Ji Wu, Ji Tao, and Baby heard their conversation, they were overjoyed and couldn't help but laugh out loud. As for Zhou Cheng and Zhou Li, their shoulders were trembling violently. It was obvious that they were having a hard time holding it in. Ha ha ha. Leng Ruoxue laughed happily. The two of them were so funny. To be honest, Leng Ruoxue deeply felt that the two of them were quite funny together. Besides, Zhou Kun was tall and burly, while Ji Yun looked weak and fragile. When the two of them stood together, they actually looked surprisingly harmonious. It seemed that she also had the potential to be a fujoshi. Miss Leng, I'm being bullied, and you're actually still laughing. After a long while, Zhou Kun, who only regained his senses after hearing the laughter, could not help but say with a bitter expression when he saw Leng Ruoxue laughing so happily. Ah! Upon hearing Zhou Kun's words, Leng Ruoxue could not help but wipe the cold sweat on her forehead. She thought to herself, is Zhou Kun acting coquettishly? A man as strong as a bear had said such words to her. It was too terrifying. She couldn't help but shiver. Ruoxue, I didn't bully him. I didn't grab his chest on purpose. Woo, he still wants to frame me and make me take responsibility, humph. I will definitely not be responsible for him. At this moment, Ji Yun also spoke with righteous indignation. His handsome little face was still alternating between green and white, and he was faintly in a state of fury. Damn it. When did I say that I want you to take responsibility? Ji Yun's words made Zhou Kun jump in shock. If it were not for his weak body, he would have jumped even higher. Fuck. This was really too hateful, wasn't this just trying to lie? You didn't say it clearly, but you made it very clear that I understand. I'll say it again, don't think I'll take responsibility for you. When Leng Ruoxue and the others heard this, they were all impressed by Ji Yun. Especially when they saw Zhou Kun's face, which was uglier than constipation, they felt that the highest level of anger was Ji Yun's. He kept pretending to be stupid, but the other party could not do anything to him. Who asked him to think that Ji Yun was a fool? Wouldn't he be stupider than a fool to argue with a fool? Seeing that Zhou Kun's body was fuming with anger and there was a tendency for green smoke to rise from the top of his head, Leng Ruoxue became the peacemaker and said, all right. Everyone, please speak less. What happened just now was just an accident, and the cause was an earthquake. So, don't destroy our unity because of such a small matter. Let's think about what we should do next. If she did not speak, Zhou Kun would probably kill Ji Yun in a fit of anger. To be honest, she was not sure what kind of strength Ji Yun had. Since Leng Ruoxue had spoken, Zhou Kun only snorted coldly and turned his head away to ignore Ji Yun. Ji Yun, on the other hand, ran over to Leng Ruoxue and said with a silly smile, he'll listen to everything Ruoxue says. Well, do whatever Ruoxue says. His words made Ji Wu and Ji Tao speechless. They couldn't bear it anymore and complained in their hearts, does this guy have any principles? As for Zhou Kun, when he heard those nauseating words, apart from feeling nauseated, he also wanted to give Ji Yun a good beating. This coward was really too despicable. He actually tried to please Leng Ruoxue in front of him. He could tolerate it but not his aunt. But I don't know what we should do. The earthquake just now came too suddenly. Leng Ruoxue said with a faint smile. She didn't know why, but she felt that something was about to happen. Then what should we do? When Ji Yun heard this, he was instantly dumbfounded. He had no idea what to do. What else can we do? Of course, I'm looking for the reason. Zhou Kun shouted in a rough voice, looking down on Ji Yun's submissive appearance. Where can we find the reason? Ji Yun asked shamelessly, his clear eyes wide open. How would I know? Zhou Kun roared in a bad mood. Since you don't even know where we should go to find the reason, then aren't you just talking nonsense? Who wouldn't have thought of the reason? The key is where we can find the reason. Ji Yun lectured Zhou Kun in a serious and earnest manner, causing him to be stunned and unable to react for a long time. After he finished speaking, Ji Yun turned to Leng Ruoxue and said, Ruoxue, what I said makes sense, right? Leng Ruoxue nodded helplessly. She could tell that although Zhou Kun had always wanted to find trouble with Ji Yun was like Zhou Kun's nemesis. Not only did he not manage to find trouble with him, but he also infuriated Leng Ruoxue to death in the end. AI. The interaction between people was indeed wonderful. She had a deep understanding of this. Then you think of a good idea. After being stunned for a moment, Zhou Kun came back to his senses. At the same time, he happened to hear Ji Yun acting obediently to Len Ruoxue, who responded to him. He was immediately enraged and said to Ji Yun, "I'll listen to everything Ruoxue says." Ji Yun said shyly. From his words, it seemed like Len Ruoxue was the head of the family. Chapter 1854, The Barrier Shattered, 2. Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun became even angrier and couldn't help but curse, "Fuck. You coward, are you even a man? How could he let a woman stand up for him? You've disgraced us men, so don't tell anyone that I know you. It's fine if you don't want to say it. Do you think you're some famous person?" "Ah. It was wrong. You're indeed famous now. After all, in the entire divine realm, only the three of you from your Zhou clan would dare to shit here. No one else would have the guts to do so." Ji Yun touched a sore spot and deliberately added salt to Zhou Kun's wound. As for Zhou Kun, he was so angry that his face turned pale and his body trembled non-stop. Upon seeing this, Len Ruoxue was really afraid that he would faint accidentally. She was not concerned about him, but if Zhou Kun fainted, it would bring them trouble. At that time, wouldn't they still have to stay here to accompany him? Cough cough. Len Ruoxue cleared her throat and coughed twice. At the same time, she gave Ji Yun a look, telling him to stop while he was ahead and not to go too far. Although Zhou Kun was quite annoying, with the three of them around, they could at least help when they encountered trouble. However, if he were to faint from anger, wouldn't they be the ones in trouble? Ji Yun understood what he meant and obediently shut his mouth, pretending to be obedient. Zhou Kun's body trembled for a long time before he finally calmed down. He seemed to have collapsed and sat on the ground. His face was pale, as if he had seen a ghost. After a long time, the color on Zhou Kun's face finally returned to normal. Upon seeing that, Len Ruoxue suggested that they leave the place and go somewhere else to take a look. After all, the tremor just now could not have happened without any warning. There must have been some signs. After a few days of rest, the group finally set off again. At this time, the various families that were watching the special space through the screen outside the arena also received the news from the Divine Lord's estate. In the special space, all the barriers had shattered for some reason. The moment they heard this news, all the family representatives turned pale with fright. The barrier shattered? What did that mean? It meant that the participants would not be restricted to any group. In other words, it was possible for a divine emperor to encounter a priest. If there was a conflict between the two sides, the priest would have a reason to kill. When they thought of this possibility, all the family representatives could no longer remain calm. After all, which family did not have a few enemies? If someone had really done something to them in the special space, they would be helpless. After all, the Divine Master's estate had ordered before the match that life and death were up to fate in the special space. Moreover, if a member of the clan was killed by the enemy, he was not allowed to take the opportunity to cause trouble and seek revenge. This was the cruelest part of the competition. However, even though they were mentally prepared for the possible death of their clansmen, they would not be able to remain calm if someone really died. Compared to the other people who were scared and jittery, the Ning family's exclusive seats were quite calm. In fact, it was not that the foreign affairs elder and the others were not worried, nor that they did not want to speak. It was just that seeing that the family master and Uncle Long were all silent, as if they were thinking, no one dared to disturb them. After a long while, Uncle Long broke the heavy atmosphere and said, "Ning family boy, what do you think of this?" Hearing Uncle Long speak, the foreign affairs elder and the others finally heaved a sigh of relief. Before this, they didn't even dare to breathe. "I think this is a bit abnormal. You should know that this is not the first time the elite gathering is held. How could there be such a mistake? Furthermore, that special space was personally created by Master Yu. How could the space barrier be broken?" The master of the Ning family frowned. As he said this, his eyes turned to the first elder. Old man, don't you think so? The master of the Ning family asked the grand elder. Master Yu is a godlike existence in the hearts of us artifact craftsmen. The things he refines must be of the highest quality, so it's impossible for such a problem to occur. Let alone the equipment refined by Master Yu, even an ordinary artifact craftsman would not make such a low-level mistake. The first elder said with a serious expression. He could not help but worry for Leng Ruoxue and the rest because this accident was obviously man-made. When Uncle Long heard their conversation, he looked at them quietly for a long time. In the end, he didn't say a word and continued to close his eyes. However, at this time, his heart was already in turmoil because he knew that this incident was most likely directed at Shuai. However, he believed in the little girl's ability and believed that she would be able to settle this matter. The reason why he didn't explain it too clearly was because he was afraid that the two boys would be worried and lose control. In fact, no matter what was happening in the special space, they could only watch helplessly. Hence, they could only trust in Leng Ruoxue and the rest's ability to adapt to any situation. Seeing Uncle Long's reaction, the master of the Ning family and the first elder both understood what he meant. After sighing, they fell silent again, and the atmosphere became even more depressing than before. When the foreign affairs elder and the others saw this, their foreheads were full of cold sweat, and they didn't dare to breathe. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue and the others who were searching for the reason in the special space were completely unaware of the worried feelings of the representatives from the various families. That was until they met another person. That person had the cultivation of a god king. Leng Ruoxue squinted her beautiful eyes as she sized up the arrogant man who treated them like ants. The man had an ordinary appearance and looked to be around 30 years old. His eyes were slightly cloudy as he stared lecherously at Leng Ruoxue's perky breasts. He smacked his lips and his eyes revealed a determined expression. When she saw his lecherous gaze, Leng Ruoxue laughed coldly in her heart. If not for the fact that she was afraid of exposing her true strength, she would have long gone up to teach this man a lesson. Humph. He dared to look at her so openly and with such a perverted gaze. Wasn't he looking for death? Moreover, when she saw the man, Leng Ruoxue realized that Zhou Kun was not too bad. At least, on the surface, Zhou Kun respected her very much. However, this man was clearly challenging the limits of her patience. Although Leng Ruoxue was enduring it silently, Zhou Kun could not stand it. One should know that he had long treated Leng Ruoxue as his own possession. Of course, only he could look at his own woman in such an unbridled manner. If other men dared to use such a vulgar gaze to size up his woman, weren't they challenging his dignity as a man? Therefore, Zhou Kun was furious. The anger that he had accumulated over the past few days suddenly exploded at this moment. Zhou Kun was like a shooting star as he rushed in front of the man and raised his hand to punch him. His fist contained a surging divine power, and it was as cold as the cold wind as it attacked the lecherous man opposite him. The man saw that Zhou Kun was not coming with good intentions and quickly dodged to the side to avoid the punch. However, the wind from the punch still brushed past his shoulder and left a bloody wound on his body. He was instantly enraged. Chapter 1855, The Barrier Shattered, 3, Where did this wild brat come from? How dare you injure your grandpa's son? The man bellowed in anger. His voice was unusually sharp, causing Leng Ruoxue and the others' eardrums to ring. I'm hitting you. You dare to covet my woman, you must be tired of living. Zhou Kun said angrily, Humph. He couldn't deal with Ji Yun in front of Leng Ruoxue, but could he not deal with this fellow who had come to his door to seek death? At this moment, Zhou Kun was filled with anger and did not pay attention to the man's cultivation level at all. Moreover, he was not as capable as Leng Ruoxue to see through other people's cultivation levels. Therefore, even if he had seen it, he was afraid that he would not be able to see through the man's cultivation level. Otherwise, he would not have rushed forward to fight with the other party just because he was acting rashly. When Ji Yun saw how brave Zhou Kun was, a look of admiration appeared on his handsome face. He then ran to Leng Ruoxu's side and exclaimed, Ruoxue, Zhou Kun is so brave. You actually dare to fight someone of a higher level than you. In fact, he couldn't tell the man's cultivation level, and there could only be two reasons for such a situation. One was that the man's strength was above theirs, and the other was that he had hidden his cultivation. However, participants were not allowed to hide their strength here, otherwise, it would be unfair to the other participants. Therefore, he concluded that the man's strength was above theirs. However, Zhou Kun was obviously too busy venting his anger and didn't pay attention to the man's cultivation at all. He rushed forward without a care. Although he wanted to do that too, he was not an impulsive person by nature. Therefore, he was naturally not as brainless as Zhou Kun. He used more wisdom. Just like how he was with Ruoxue, he. After hearing Ji Yun's words, Leng Ruoxue shot him a glance and whispered, this man clearly has ill intentions. Now is not the time to make sarcastic remarks. Quickly go and help him. As for why there was a God-King level participant here, only the heavens would know. Oh. Ji Yun softly replied, feeling a little wronged. In truth, he wasn't just being sarcastic. Although he didn't deny that he had the intention of watching the show, he was more worried about what they should do. If they couldn't deal with this man, then Ruoxue would be in deep trouble. Ji Yun, who was feeling a little depressed, immediately gave Ji Wu and Ji Tao a look. The two of them understood and rushed over to help Zhou Kun. Although they hated Zhou Kun from the bottom of their hearts, they were now on the same boat. Therefore, they naturally could not sit idly by. With Ji Wu and Ji Tao joining the battle, Zhou Kun, who was already sweating profusely and had cold sweat all over his forehead, suddenly felt a lot less pressure. Fuck. It was only after the fight that he realized that this despicable man was stronger than him. After knowing this fact, he had a moment of regret, but at the same time, he was also very clear that he had already driven a duck to the perch. He couldn't back down now. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to hold his head high in front of the Ji family's coward in the future. Although the pressure on Zhou Kun was reduced, the wretched-looking man felt that it was a little difficult to deal with three people at the same time. Initially, he was more than capable of dealing with Zhou Kun alone, but now that there were two more people, he not only had to guard against Zhou Kun's attack but also the sneak attack of the other two people at the same time. Hence, he seemed to be a little flustered. Although he was stronger than Ji Wu and the others, he wasn't strong enough to withstand a group attack. After all, his cultivation wasn't at the peak of the God King level. As a result, it was impossible for him to take on 100 people at once. But now, he had only dealt with 3 people, and his steps were a bit messy. He thought that the other party would be intimidated by his cultivation and would be afraid of shooting at the rat for fear of breaking the vase. He didn't expect that these young fellows were like newborn calves who weren't afraid of tigers. They knew that his strength was above them, but they still dared to fight him head-on. This fact made him quite depressed. In fact, he had completely guessed wrong, because Zhou Kun had rushed forward to fight with him without any regard previously, not because he was not afraid, but because he had been impulsive. Otherwise, if Zhou Kun had known in advance that his cultivation base was higher than his, he might not have dared to do that. After seeing that this man was just a man with an empty appearance, Leng Ruoxue turned to Zhou Li and Zhou Qing coldly and said, "Your young master Kun is fighting with someone. Aren't you going to help?" She had a very bad impression of Zhou Kun and his lackeys, especially at a time like this. Zhou Kun was leading the charge, but the two of them actually showed fear. Not only did they not have any intention of helping, but they even took a few steps back. This also made Leng Ruoxue's impression of them drop to the bottom. The other party's cultivation is above ours. Can we defeat him? Zhou Li couldn't help but say in a low voice. He only wanted to keep his little life and didn't want to die here. How would you know if you don't try? Do you want to die here? If we don't deal with this man, none of us will be able to escape. Leng Ruoxue reminded. No, that's impossible. His target is you. As long as you stay, he'll definitely let us live. Zhou Qing said as well. He was still a little resentful in his heart because the cause of this incident was Leng Ruoxue. Now, they were even implicated. Sob. Why were their lives so bitter? What did you just say? Hearing Zhou Cheng's words, Leng Ruoxue narrowed her beautiful eyes and asked in an unfriendly tone. Say that again. Ji Yun also roared with unusual anger. For a moment, the aura on his body rose greatly. Zhou Cheng and Zhou Li were completely dumbfounded. However, they believed that their eyes were playing tricks on them. It was impossible for cowards from the Ji family to have such an intimidating aura. It must be. The two of them consoled themselves in their hearts. It's all because of this woman that we've attracted a strong enemy. So, isn't it fine to just hand her over to that man? Zhou Qing warned as he did not sense any danger from Ji Yun. Is that so? Leng Ruoxue laughed coldly, feeling even more disgusted with the two lackeys of the Zhou family. However, before she could do anything, she saw a black bolt of lightning charging towards Zhou Cheng and Zhou Li. In that instant, other than the sounds of Zhou Kun, Ji Wu, and Ji Tao fighting with the wretched-looking man, there was only the sudden shrill shrieks that sounded like the wails of ghosts and the howls of wolves. Arg! Help me! The long and trembling cry caused Leng Ruoxue's hair to stand on end. She couldn't help but wonder why a man's scream was so shocking. However, what surprised her even more was Ji Yun. This fellow's attacks were fast, ruthless, and accurate. He specifically aimed for the weak and vital parts of a man's body, causing Leng Ruoxue to be extremely shocked. Oh my god! Was this the model of a small white rabbit transforming into a fierce big tiger? He didn't expect that Ji Yun, who had always pretended to be a weak little white rabbit, would be so intimidating when he was angry. Seeing Ji Yun's left fist and right leg beating up Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng, baby, who was lying in Leng Ruoxue's arms and watching the show, also felt his claws itch. Without even greeting Leng Ruoxue, he impatiently rushed into the one-sided battle between Ji Yun, Zhou Li, and Zhou Cheng. Watch my shadowless claw! Baby roared. After that, its 4 claws flew out, kicking and scratching repeatedly, and its tail even acted as a whip. Paw! In the blink of an eye, Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng's clothes were torn and dangled on their bodies. They were in danger of being exposed at any time. Not only that, their faces and bodies were covered with countless claw marks. Needless to say, these were all the work of the treasure. In fact, it had long wanted to teach the 3 people of the Zhou family a lesson. However, seeing that Zhou Kun's performance today was rather remarkable, it decided to let him off for the time being. However, it would never let go of the 2 dogs. Humph. He actually wanted to hand over his cute master to that disgusting and wretched man. If this wasn't courting death, what was? At the thought of this, its shadowless claw once again displayed the advantage of being impossible to guard against. Very quickly, Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng fainted in a tragic state. After the baby made its move, the two could do nothing but let out painful howls until they finally fainted. The treasure's natural and smooth movements left Ji Yun dumbstruck. At this moment, he even felt that he had been too lenient. Look at how ruthless this little fox is. It turned out that it was not his own flesh. He glanced at the minced meat that had fallen beside Zhou Cheng and Zhou Li. He was so disgusted that he almost vomited his lunch. Sob. He probably wouldn't want to eat meat for a while. It was really too horrifying. The claw marks on Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng's faces and bodies were extremely deep. Following the tiny scratch marks, blood continuously flowed out from their bodies. Very quickly, a small patch of the ground was dyed red, and it mixed with the bits of flesh that had fallen to the ground. The scene was truly terrifying. This caused Leng Ruoxue and Ji Yun to turn their heads away, not wanting to look at the bloody scene. After Baby cooperated with Ji Yun to punish Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng, Baby, who clearly hadn't had enough fun with his claws, turned his attention to the vulgar man. After proudly looking at Leng Ruoxue and Ji Yun, whose little face had turned pale from fear, the baby was like a purple lightning bolt. It immediately rushed in front of the vulgar man and roared, "Grandson! Your grandfather is here! Quickly die!" Upon hearing this, Len Ruox's forehead was filled with black lines. As for the pale-faced Ji Yun, his clear eyes were sparkling as he looked at the purple figure of light dancing up and down with admiration. He had a new idol. Chapter 1856, The Tragedy of the Wretched Man. 1. Ji Yun's eyes were fixed on the treasure in the chaotic battle. It seized every opportunity to attack from the left and right, and he couldn't help but cheer for it in his heart. Good luck! Scratch him! Scratch him to death! Ji Yun couldn't help but exclaim in excitement. When Len Ruoxua saw his helping the evildoer, more cold sweat broke out on her forehead. The treasure, who was looking for an opportunity in the midst of Ji Wu's group's chaotic battle, heard Ji Yun's shout of encouragement and began to scratch even harder. Suddenly, a purple lightning bolt could be seen dancing up and down in the group's chaotic battle. It was accompanied by the wretched man's ear-piercing scream, forming a unique concert. Arg! That damn little save life! I won't let you off! The wretched man whose face was covered in blood roared in anger and reached out to grab the treasure. However, the petite baby was unusually agile. The vulgar man could only see a purple shadow scuttling around in front of him, but he could not catch it. This fact made him even angrier. Little save life. You're dead. The vulgar man wiped the fresh blood off his face and continued to roar. You're the little save life. Your whole family is a little reserved. When baby heard himself being scolded, he scolded back without any restraint. Damn it. If I don't kill you today, my last name isn't Sun. The vulgar man was both embarrassed and angry. Other than a red color on his face, there was basically no other color. However, one could imagine how furious he was at this moment when one felt the anger spewing out from his body. Don't you change your surname to Sun. If you don't have the surname Sun, how can I be your grandfather? Baby said angrily. At the same time, he started to attack the vulgar man's bottom lane. Oh woo! An even more painful and shrill cry suddenly rang out. The vulgar man clutched his lower body tightly, and kept jumping around on the spot. His face was filled with an expression of extreme pain. When Ji Wu and the others saw this, they subconsciously stopped what they were doing. However, their eyes were still fixed on the vulgar man. However, with the wretched-looking man's current state, he probably couldn't care about them. Looking at the part he was covering, Ji Wu and the others expressed deep sympathy for him. He wondered if that fellow would still be able to be humane after being hit by the little fox a few times. How pitiful! They laughed gloatingly. At this time, the vulgar man also immediately took out a healing pill and ate it. The pain was relieved a lot, but the strange thing was that there was still a faint pain there, accompanied by a trace of itchiness. What was going on? Although he had doubts in his heart, he had no time to care about them. All his anger was instantly concentrated on the little fox who was smiling at him not far away. Humph. He would not let go of this detestable little reserved life. As for these few men, he would continue to deal with them after he had dealt with this annoying little Qiansheng. At the thought of this, he immediately shifted his target to his baby. With a leap, he went straight to his baby. However, his baby would not stand there stupidly and wait for him. Instead, it nimbly jumped behind Zhou Kun to seek protection. In this way, it was impossible for Zhou Kun to stay out of it even if he wanted to. Hee hee. Seeing that the little fox had drawn the hatred of the wretched man to him, Zhou Kun was furious and furious. Damn it! He had just wanted to catch his breath with great difficulty, but in the end, he had been harmed by this hateful little fox. At this time, his mind was a lot clearer. Naturally, he could see that this wretched man's strength was above his own. Therefore, he had a slight intention to retreat in his heart. However, he had always been concerned about his face. If he fled without fighting, he would have no face to see anyone after this news spread. That was why he had been holding on. He had thought that since the wretched man had shifted his target to the little fox, there was nothing left for him to do. He could also take the opportunity to leave the battle circle. Who knew that not only was he unable to leave, but he was also dragged into it again. He was so depressed. As the wretched man pounced on Zhou Kun like a tiger, Zhou Kun hurriedly mobilized the divine power in his body to stop him. At this time, Baby stood on top of Zhou Kun's head and commanded him condescendingly, "Hurry up. Beat him down there. He'll never be able to harm women again. Zhou Kun. You should use more strength. What, you didn't eat? Why is it so soft and powerless? Zhou Kun. Are you still a man? Can you still do it? AI. To think that you're so big, I didn't expect you to be so weak. You're so useless. Zhou Kun. Didn't I tell you to hit him down there? Why don't you listen? Zhou Kun. If you don't listen to my command, I'll have to teach you a good lesson." The baby continued to shout loudly, making Zhou Kun furious and angry. The aura in his body exploded instantly, and a chill pounced on the wretched man. In an instant, the wretched man's lower body was hit again. Arg! Damn it! I won't let you off. You're dead. The wretched-looking man, who was in unbearable pain, roared with all his might. He glared at Zhou Kun fiercely with his eyes that were spewing fire, as if he was going to swallow Zhou Kun alive. On the other hand, Zhou Kun was a little dumbfounded. He was clearly not going to hit that place. Woo, how did this happen? He could not understand. After glancing at the fire-spewing lecherous man and then at Zhou Kun, who was a little dumbfounded, Baby patted Zhou Kun's head like an elder and praised him, "Zhou family's kid, well done. Come. Continue. We won't stop until he's beaten into a eunuch." What's a eunuch? Upon hearing Baby's words, Zhou Kun was in a daze, and he couldn't help but ask dumbly. Ha ha ha. A eunuch was a man who couldn't have sex and didn't have that thing. Our goal is to turn this vulgar man into the first eunuch of the divine realm. Now, let's work towards this goal. Of course, if you can't turn him into a eunuch, I'll make you one. So, it's up to you. The treasure issued an order with a hint of threat. As for whether this wretched man would become the first eunuch of the divine realm, it was not within its scope of consideration. If anyone was interested in this title, they could communicate with it themselves. It only cared about creating eunuchs and did not care about the ranking between them. Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun shuddered and became much more awake. However, at that moment, his back was already drenched in cold sweat. It was obvious that he was frightened by the baby. Moreover, in order to ensure that he would not become the eunuch that the little fox was talking about, he could only work hard to let others have this profession. Woo! He could not understand why he was afraid of the threat of a little fox. The little fox looked too harmless. However, a guy who looked harmless on the outside was often more terrifying. Now, he had a deep understanding of it. Looks like I can't judge a book by its cover in the future. Of course, he couldn't judge a beast by its appearance. Chapter 1857, The Tragedy of the Wretched Man, 2. At the thought of this, Zhou Kun immediately glared at the wretched man and said loudly, "That I will work hard to make you the first eunuch in the divine realm." After he finished speaking, his body couldn't help but tremble. Who asked this wretched man to be stronger than him? It would be a lie to say that he wasn't afraid, but under the little fox's despotic power, he had no choice but to work hard towards the goal that his baby had set for himself. Upon hearing Zhou Kun's words and the conversation between the man and the fox, the wretched man was furious. His face was green and black, and his chest was panting heavily. The veins on his forehead were also throbbing, and his eyes were burning with anger. At this moment, he was so angry that he couldn't speak. Watching the interaction between the two, Ji Wu and Ji Tao looked at each other with black lines on their foreheads. They didn't know what to say. This little fox's wondrous ideas had already completely convinced them. It was really too creative. However, at this time, they were only focused on being surprised and had completely forgotten that Baby had once said that any man who stayed by his lovely master's side would have to be stabbed. Otherwise, they would have reacted. After all, according to Baby's previous theory, it was impossible for this wretched man to become the first eunuch in the divine realm, unless there were no other men by his master's side. As no one spoke again, the atmosphere at the scene became heavy. Zhou Kun and the perverted man glared at each other while Baby sat on Zhou Kun's head with its silver eyes half closed and a little drowsy. After a long time, a light laugh broke the silence. It was Ji Tao who laughed. At once, everyone's eyes turned to Ji Tao, making him feel a little embarrassed. Ah! Don't look at me like that, you'll be shy. Ji Tao also ridiculed him. Upon hearing this, Ji Wu, who was beside him, quickly jumped away and kept a safe distance from him. Oh my God! It was too terrifying. Ji Wu was a little shocked to hear Ji Tao, who had always prided himself on being a pure man, say such words. He could not help but wipe the cold sweat from his forehead and sneaked a strange look at Ji Tao. To be honest, if these words had been said by Ji Yun, he would not have reacted in such a way. However, the person who had said these words was Ji Tao, so one could not blame him for having such a big reaction. Seeing Ji Wu's reaction, Ji Tao was speechless. Was there a need to? He had only teased them a little to ease the heavy atmosphere, but who knew that everyone would react like this? Although the others didn't show it as obviously as Ji Wu, they all looked at him with a strange gaze, including Zhou Kun. It was as if they didn't know him anymore. This result made him extremely conflicted and depressed. However, Ji Tao's gloominess did not last long. Their attention was once again attracted by the vulgar man. And the cause of this was the sudden moaning. Ah! The wretched man couldn't help but cry out and stretched out a hand to calm the commotion in his lower body. Who knew that the more he did, the stronger the reaction, and his cry became even louder. Ji Wu and the others were instantly petrified. What? What was going on? Why did he suddenly have such a big reaction? And in front of them. Fuck. There's a woman here, alright? When they thought of Leng Ruoxue, Ji Yun and the rest were immediately enraged. Meanwhile, Baby reacted quickly and jumped onto Leng Ruoxue's shoulder. It used its large tail to cover Leng Ruoxue's eyes so that its adorable master's eyes would not be contaminated by unclean things. As for Ji Yun and the rest, they immediately rushed forward and kicked the lecherous man who was immersed in pain and joy to the ground. Following that, they began to punch and kick him. At this time, in their anger, they didn't even care about using Shin power, but directly used the most primitive attack method. In the blink of an eye, the vulgar man who was in a state of soul travel was beaten until he was dizzy and couldn't distinguish north, south, east and west. Suddenly, crack! A crisp sound rang out, accompanied by the wretched man's painful howl, ah! When Ji Yun and the others saw this, they focused their eyes. Only then did they discover that in the chaos just now, someone had kicked the vulgar man's important part too hard and broke it. At this moment, that part was dangling from the vulgar man's body and was about to leave. This situation was somewhat out of everyone's expectations. Just as everyone was dumbfounded and tongue-tied, they saw the important part of the vulgar man's body completely abandon him and leave him. Ah! They had successfully created what could possibly be the first eunuch in the history of the divine realm. Instantly, blood gushed out from the lower half of the vulgar man's body, and he lived up to their expectations and fainted. As for whether he fainted from pain or anger, it was not within the scope of everyone's concern. Just as the few of them looked at each other, not knowing what to say, Baby jumped to their side and praised, "Not bad. You've done well, I'm very satisfied." After saying that, a bolt of lightning divine power shot out from the baby's little claw. In an instant, the piece of meat that the vulgar man had dropped on the ground was burned into charcoal, and it emitted a charred smell. Ji Yun and the others stared with wide eyes. This time, that thing could not be connected. Otherwise, if it was well preserved, there might be a possibility of restoration, but the price would definitely not be small. However, this was good. At least it saved money. Ignoring the surprised gazes of Ji Yun and the others, the precious little claw pointed at the unconscious man and said, "What should we do with this guy?" "That. Well, do as you say." "Well, listen to you." Zhou Kun swallowed his saliva with difficulty and said with lingering fear. "Oh. Then I'll use him to test out my new skill." Baby laughed evilly. "No problem, you can use him as practice." Zhou Kun quickly tried to please her. He could not deny that he was a little afraid of the little fox. Baby did things cleanly and efficiently. After making the decision, it threw a large water ball at the vulgar man, drenching him like a fallen chicken. Then, its little claws kept releasing the lightning skill, lightning ball. Thunder flash. Lightning slash and the others were released one after another. Almost instantly, Ji Yun and the others could only helplessly watch as the unconscious vulgar man on the ground turned from a blood-red color to a charred black. Furthermore, his body was currently emitting the smell of burnt meat. Immediately, everyone was so disgusted that they almost vomited. This was simply too brutal. First water, then thunder. How could he let people live? For a moment, there was an indescribable fear in everyone's eyes when they looked at the treasure. At this moment, Leng Ruoxue walked forward and released a small flame from her hand. With a light flick, the small flame ignited the body of the lecherous man. In an instant, the lecherous man turned into ashes and disappeared from the world. Chapter 1858, The Tragedy of the Wretched Man, 3. This was a blatant act of destroying the evidence. It definitely was. When Ji Yun and the others saw this scene, their thoughts were surprisingly the same. Moreover, seeing how skilled Leng Ruoxue and the little fox were, they must have done this many times. With that in mind, they looked at Leng Ruoxue with fear in their eyes. However, Ji Yun and the other two were better off. The one who was the most chilled was Zhou Kun. Upon seeing that, Zhou Kun was completely dumbfounded. Boo-hoo. As a woman, how could she do such a violent thing? Furthermore, the temperature of the flame that Leng Ruoxue had lit up was extremely high. He could feel the scorching heat even from a distance away. If the flame had landed on him, he would have been burnt to ashes in an instant. His face turned pale at the thought of this. At this moment, he was glad that he was still polite to Leng Ruoxue. Otherwise, he might have ended up like this fellow. After dealing with the wretched-looking man, Leng Ruoxue said to Zhou Kun indifferently, "Also, it's time to deal with your two lackeys. They actually wanted to hand me over to that wretched man just to live. Humph. You really don't know what's good for you." Ah. Upon hearing Leng Ruoxue's words, Zhou Kun wiped the cold sweat off his forehead and said carefully, "They're dead?" As he said this, he couldn't help but sneak a glance at Zhou Cheng and Zhou Li, who were lying on the ground covered in blood. He felt a lingering fear in his heart. Woo! Looking at the deep claw marks on their bodies, his little heart trembled. It was too terrifying. The little fox's methods were so brutal and bloody that it was unheard of. They should still be breathing. I only let them live because of you. Leng Ruoxue said coldly. Ah. I wonder how Miss Leng plans to deal with them. Zhou Kun didn't dare to express his opinions casually, in case he was fixed. He now deeply felt that he was in a weak position. Even a little fox could take care of him. In fact, it was not that he was weak, but that this little fox did not play by the rules. They're from the Zhou family. I'll leave it to you to deal with them. Leng Ruoxue had done Zhou Kun a favor. In fact, she felt that it made no difference whether she killed the two of them or not since they looked so dead now. After all, the treasure would not let them live in peace. Besides, they had committed unforgivable crimes in the special space. Even if she did not punish them, the God Lord's estate would punish them severely. In that case, why should she make too many enemies for herself? A small punishment was enough. On their behalf, I thank Miss Leng for her magnanimity. Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun was obviously relieved. Although he was a little annoyed with Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng's behavior, the two of them were his dogs, after all. He didn't want to let outsiders deal with them. In addition, although he was fighting with the wretched man previously, he had also heard Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng's performance. If it weren't for the fact that he was too busy at that time, he would have taught Zhou Li and Zhou Cheng a good lesson. After all, even dogs had to be obedient. Otherwise, you're not a good dog. Hence, he did not mind Leng Ruoxi's beastie turning them unrecognizable. More importantly, he did not dare to mind. You're welcome. I just don't want to dirty my hands. Leng Ruoxue said nonchalantly. I understand. Zhou Kun smiled in embarrassment. Then, he said worriedly, Miss Leng, that guy just now should be from the Sun family. Now that we've killed him, I'm afraid the Sun family will find trouble with us. So, we have to be more careful. What are you afraid of? He's my grandson, so don't worry too much. My grandson's family won't do anything to us. After hearing Zhou Kun's words, Baby promised shamelessly. Ah. I'm telling the truth. Zhou Kun felt a little helpless. It was not the time to joke. The Sun family? When Leng Ruoxue heard this, she frowned. She had only been in the divinity for a short period of time. Other than the most famous 8 divine domains and the headquarters of the weapon craftsmen and alchemy masters, she knew very little about the forces in the divinity. Therefore, she was not sure what kind of status the Sun family had in the divinity. However, she did not care about the 8 divine domains, so why would she be afraid of a mere Sun family? She just did not know if the Sun family in the divinity had any special relationship with the Sun family in the Haotian continent. The Sun family is ranked in the top 10 among the many peak powers in the divine realm. They are a bit stronger than our Zhou family and the Ji family that Ji Yun and the others are from. Furthermore, the Sun family has always been kind and friendly. The patriarch of the Sun family has a wide range of friends and is kind and charitable. He has a very high status in the divine realm. Right now, most of the families outside should already know that we have killed a member of the Sun family. I'm afraid that the patriarch of the Sun family doesn't even need to give an order. Those who have received the Sun family's favor will take the initiative to stand up for the Sun family. Zhou Kun explained. Although the perverted man's death was entirely his own fault, the Sun family would definitely not be completely indifferent about it, which was exactly what he was worried about. Aren't the rules of the competition that life and death are up to fate? Moreover, the competition also clearly states that death in the competition cannot be used as an excuse for revenge. Do you think the Sun family would still dare to play the game despite knowing the truth? Leng Ruoxue said calmly. Miss Leng, the competition is dead, but people are alive. After the competition is over, if the other party finds an excuse to make a move, who can control it? At that time, I'm afraid that the God Lord's estate will stay out of it. After all, as long as it doesn't cause any serious chaos in the God world, the God Lord's estate won't interfere with the conflicts between the clans. Zhou Kun was afraid that Leng Ruoxue didn't understand the twists and turns in his words. Therefore, he deliberately made it clear, which was also tacitly agreed by the various families. But he's dead now, and we've offended the Sun family. What's the point of thinking about this? Leng Ruoxue said with a faint smile. She was not used to Zhou Kun suddenly becoming cautious. That's right, the Sun family has already turned into ashes, what's the use of being afraid now? What's more, just now, the Sun family made such a despicable structure in front of us. Whether it's us or the audience outside the arena, they must have seen it clearly. If the Sun family really wants to find trouble with us for such a disgraceful family member, then they will lose even more face. In addition, I think that the Sun family has done such a disgraceful thing, so they must be more anxious than us. They absolutely won't bother to find trouble with us, so rest assured. If he really wants to find trouble with us, our Ji family is not afraid, hee. Could it be that your Zhou family is afraid? Ji Yun said disapprovingly. His words made Zhou Kun's face turn green and white in anger. the two colors alternated between each other. However, the few of them were now on the same boat. Therefore, even if Zhou Kun was angry in his heart, he had to swallow his anger. Our Zhou family will not be afraid, Zhou Kun said, unwilling to be outdone. He would never lose to the useless coward of the Ji family. Otherwise, how could he survive in the divine realm in the future? That's good. At that time, we can just join forces, Ji Yun suggested. Temporarily turning enemies into friends was still possible. You can make the decision. Zhou Kun was surprised, as he could not make the decision on this matter. Of course. My family's old ancestor dotes on me a lot, so he will naturally stand up for me, Ji Yun said in a tsundere manner, his clear and handsome face filled with pride. Upon seeing his appearance, Zhou Kun's heart was filled with envy, jealousy, and hatred. He just couldn't understand how that fool, Ji Yun, could have such good luck. Everyone in the Ji family treated him as a treasure, and they were afraid of him melting in their mouths or falling out of their hands. Ruoxue, don't be afraid. If the Sun family really looks for trouble, it'll definitely protect you. Ignoring Zhou Kun's resentful gaze, Ji Yun continued to speak to Leng Ruoxue. Thank you. However, you just need to protect yourself. I can take care of myself, Leng Ruoxue declined. When Ji Tao and the rest heard this, they immediately recalled Leng Ruoxue's act of destroying the corpse and the bloodied methods of that violent little fox. A chill ran down their spines. He probably didn't need anyone's protection. However, after hearing Leng Ruoxue's words, tears immediately welled up in Ji Yun's clear eyes. He looked at Leng Ruoxue with a wronged expression and said, Ruoxue, do you despise me? Wu, how could you reject me? He was sad. Hee hee. You're right, my cute master doesn't like you, very, very much. At this time, the treasure, who couldn't bear to look at it, said very impolitely. What it hated the most was Ji Yun acting pitiful. Who asked it to be so overbearing and think that it was their specialty? Now that Ji Yun had violated their exclusive rights, it naturally had to retaliate. Baby, you're my idol. How can you be gloating? After Ji Yun heard his precious words, his expression became even more aggrieved. Idol? What was that? Can it be eaten? Baby heard this and blinked his bright silver eyes, asking curiously. Ah. I can't. A few drops of cold sweat fell from Ji Yun's forehead. He could tell that this little fox was playing dumb. Then who wants to be your idol? Baby pouted his little mouth and said arrogantly. Idol means that I admire you a lot. Ji Yun helplessly sighed. This little fox was too difficult to deal with. Don't worship me, I'm a legend, Bao Bei said disapprovingly as it waved its big furry tail. All right. You're a legend. Ji Yun was speechless. As Leng Ruoxue listened to her precious seemingly familiar legendary story, she could not help but think of Bing Yao, who was still sleeping in the bracelet. This was something that little fellow always said. However, Wu had always been in closed-door cultivation, so Bing Yao had accompanied him. Even though Bing Yao was only sleeping. Now, she really missed those two guys. After a long time. Pulling her thoughts back to the special space, Leng Ruoxue glanced at the dark-faced Zhou Kun and the depressed Ji Yun. She said indifferently, do you guys know what cultivation level that guy had? Chapter 1859, Another Trouble, 1. When the few of them heard this, they quickly looked at Leng Ruoxue. Although they knew that the other party's strength was above theirs, they could not tell the person's strength. That person is a god king. Leng Ruoxue's pink lips parted slightly as she spoke indifferently. What? Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun was immediately shocked. How? How was that possible? According to common sense, their groups should all be god-tier masters, but now, a god king had actually appeared. Wasn't this bullying? You didn't hear wrong. That person is a god king. Leng Ruoxue saw the shocked expressions on their faces and repeated her words. But our participants should all be god-tier masters. Ji Woo said after some thought. After learning about this, his mood suddenly became extremely heavy. If there were participants above the god tier here, wouldn't they just be waiting to be abused? This was too unfair to them. But the truth is, there are indeed contestants above the god tier here. The person we just met is one of them. Although I don't know if it was an accident or man-made, it is the truth. We must be careful. Leng Ruoxue warned him seriously. When Ji Yun and the others heard her words, they all nodded in agreement. Upon seeing that, Leng Ruoxue especially reminded Zhou Kun, young Master Zhou, I know that your Zhou family and the Ji family have some disputes, but the situation here is still unclear. I hope that you can consider the big picture and live in harmony with Ji Yun and the others. If you have any grudges, you can settle them however you want after you leave this place. But here, no one is allowed to drag the other down, or else don't blame me for being merciless. Her words were both a reminder and a warning. After all, she was not at ease with Zhou Kun. I understand. We're in the same boat now. I won't do anything bad on purpose. Don't worry. Zhou Kun promised. In fact, after knowing that there were participants who were above the level of a god-tier master, his heart began to race. After all, he had offended many people in the divine realm. If an enemy who was more powerful than him came and wanted to kill him using the rules here, he would have no place to cry. Therefore, he was the safest now that he was with Leng Ruoxue and the others. These people wouldn't leave him in the lurch when they saw him in danger. He thought to himself with a slight sense of pride. That's good. Let's quickly leave this place. I'm afraid that your fight just now will attract other people, and it won't be so easy to leave. Leng Ruoxue urged. The few of them nodded and left the place in a hurry. However, before they left, they had to figure out how to bring Zhou Li and Zhou Qing with them. This had become a huge problem for Ji Yun and the others. After all, these two people were not dead yet. Out of anger, Zhou Kun did not intend to cure them. However, in this way, the two of them would become a burden to everyone. In this regard, Ji Yun suggested that they should just kill them. It would save them a lot of trouble. However, Zhou Kun did not agree to it. After all, he was a member of the Zhou family. If he really wanted to punish him, he would have to return to the Zhou family. In the end, it was Leng Ruoxue who came up with a good idea for them. She gave Zhou Kun 2 animal cages, so Zhou Li and Zhou Qing, who were on the verge of death, were put into the cages as beasts and asked Zhou Kun to carry them with him. Along the way, Ji Yun couldn't help but laugh out loud whenever he thought of Zhou Li and Zhou Qing's current state. Whenever that happened, Zhou Kun would glare at Ji Yun angrily. However, in order not to destroy the temporary alliance between the two families, he had to endure his anger no matter how great it was. Therefore, most of the time, they saw Zhou Kun looking like a little wife who had been wronged and was suffering. However, what they didn't know was that because they had ganged up on the perverted man from the Sun family, their fame had increased greatly, especially Baby, who had left a deep impression on the audience. At this moment, it had been quite some time since the perverted man had been annihilated. However, many people who wished for the world to be in chaos were still talking about it. The reason for this situation was because ever since the start of the competition, there had been many unexpected incidents happening in the special space. A proper competition had now become a nondescript farce, especially for people like Leng Ruoxue. Almost all the pranks were related to them. After the perverted man made such a vulgar move in public, the master of the Sun family, who was sitting in the exclusive seat of the Sun family, had a slightly serious face. The Sun family members beside him were so scared that they didn't even dare to breathe. In fact, the master of the Sun family usually looked quite kind, but when he really put on a serious face, it was also very scary. At least, there was no one in the Sun family who wasn't afraid. Moreover, they all knew in their hearts that the master didn't like to be kind to others as rumored. However, they did not wish for such a thing to happen. Therefore, the Sun family felt very aggrieved that their master was angry at them. However, at this moment, they did not dare to say anything. Although they didn't dare to say anything, it didn't mean that no one dared to treat this matter as a joke. The Sun clan had an extremely good reputation in the divine realm, and had always been known for being kind and charitable. Basically, anyone who had a request from the Sun clan would get what they wanted in the end. As time passed, the good reputation of the Sun clan had also spread out. In the hearts of many ordinary cultivators in the divine realm, the patriarch of the Sun clan was a figure as transparent as Bodhisattva. It was precisely because of this reputation that the Sun clan was like a fish in water in the divine realm. There were even many times when the clans that were on good terms with them would give them great convenience. What's more, there were many outstanding cultivators among the ordinary cultivators that the Sun family had helped in the past. These were also the resources of the Sun family's network. It could be said that the Sun family's business among the top families was very successful. There were also rumors that the Sun family had the opportunity to compete in the 8 great divine regions this time and replace the Wen family as one of the 8 great divine regions. After all, that was the true supreme power that was recognized by everyone. However, there were both positive and negative sides to everything. No matter how good the Sun family's reputation was outside, there would still be people who would see them as a thorn in their side. The Yu family, who had the same strength as the Sun family and was ranked higher than the Sun family among the top forces, could be considered the Sun family's archenemy. At this moment, the Yu family head, who was rejoicing in the misfortune of others, was standing in front of the Sun family head, looking at him with a face full of sympathy, and comforting him with good words. "Master Sun. Since it has already happened, my condolences. I really didn't expect that this Sun Li, who usually looks like a man and dog, would actually do such a despicable thing in public. Your Sun family's face has been completely lost by him. In my opinion, this Sun Li absolutely cannot be forgiven easily. It's such a serious game, how could he be so perverted?" However, before the head of the Yu family could finish his sentence, a person beside him tugged at his sleeve and reminded him in a low voice, "Family head, Sun Li is already dead." Although his voice was soft, it was enough for the Sun family to hear him clearly. "Arg! Look at my memory. I actually forgot about that. Thank God you reminded me." The head of the Yu family pretended to be embarrassed. Then, he looked apologetically at the ashen-faced head of the Sun family and said, "Master Sun, I'm really sorry. I forgot that Sun Li has already died. However, I heard that he has a son who is also a bastard. As the saying goes, if the upper beam is not straight, the lower beam will be crooked. I think it's better to let him cross the line with the next father." In fact, what he wanted to say was that the little brat was not a good person either, so it was better to destroy him as soon as possible. Chapter 1860, Another Trouble, 2, the patriarch of the Yu family who spoke seemed to be in his 40s. He was extremely handsome, tall, and sturdy. His strength was at the level of a divine emperor. In terms of bearing, he was even a level higher than the kind and charitable patriarch of the Sun family. However, his reputation in the divine world was not even half of that of the patriarch of the Sun family. The main reason for this situation was that he was not as hypocritical as the patriarch of the Sun family. At least, this was what he thought. It should be known that he and the head of the Sun family were of the same generation and age. The two families were only separated by a city. It could be said that the two could be considered childhood sweethearts who grew up together. However, the two of them had different personalities and did not see eye to eye with each other since they were young. In the eyes of the Yu clan head, the Sun clan head was too hypocritical. No matter who or what he was facing, he would always welcome them with a smile. However, no one knew how many thoughts were hidden in his smile. As for him, he would only treat people who suited his taste differently. No matter how good the others were, as long as he didn't like them, it would be difficult for them to enter his eyes. It was because of these two different personalities that the master of the Sun family gave people the impression of being kind, while the master of the Yu family gave others the impression of being arrogant and unattainable. Thus, in the divine realm, the Yu clan's clan head definitely did not have as many friends as the Sun clan's clan head. However, the Yu clan's clan head was very confident that any of his friends would be able to help him even at the cost of a knife or go through water and tread on fire for him when he was in trouble. As for whether or not the head of the Sun family had this confidence, the head of the Yu family did not know. After all, the Sun family's connections were built up by the accumulation of favors owed to them by others. Whether they could withstand the test of time was still unknown. After the Yu family head said this, although the Sun family head's expression became even more unsightly, he didn't make things difficult for them. After all, he had a good reputation. With so many eyes on him, even if he was furious, he couldn't show it easily. Otherwise, he would fall into the old man's trap. Seeing that the head of the Sun family didn't have much of a reaction, it had to be said that the head of the Yu family was a little disappointed. How he wished he could tear off the hypocritical mask of the old man from the Sun family in public. Unfortunately, this old man did not fall for it. However, it was not easy to see him change his face. It seemed that his expectations were still too high. However, even though the master of the Sun family had suppressed his anger, it did not mean that the rest of the Sun family could. At this moment, the man beside the master of the Yu family very considerately moved a chair over and placed it behind the master of the Yu family. He smiled and said, "Master, it's too tiring to stand. If you have anything to say, you should sit down and talk to Master Sun. Otherwise, Master Sun would have to raise his head to look at you, lest others say that we're looking down on you and deliberately coming to see the Sun family make a fool of ourselves." The implication of his words was that the Sun family didn't even know how to give up their position to their master. They were really uneducated. "Mmh. You're still the most considerate one." The Yu family head's face was full of satisfaction. However, his resentful eyes drifted to the Sun family head, but he was ignored by the Sun family head. "Master Yu, this is the seat of the Sun family. We don't welcome you, so please leave our sight immediately." Finally, a member of the Sun family couldn't bear it anymore and asked him to leave. His face was obviously angry. Who knew that when the Yu family head heard his words, he didn't get angry but laughed instead. He looked at the Sun family head with a slightly aggrieved expression and said, "Sun Yu, your clansmen are actually chasing me away. You have to help me." He called out the rarely heard name of the master of the Sun family. Upon hearing Master Yu call him Sun Yu, Master Sun became even angrier. The color of his face kept changing, alternating between green and black, which was very interesting. "Fuck. This old thing from the Yu family is clearly doing this on purpose. He wants to use my name to provoke me, humph. No way. He wouldn't be fooled," Sun Yu consoled himself in his heart. Originally, the Sun family's old ancestor had given him this name, which meant that great wisdom appeared to be slow-witted, but in the mouth of this old thing from the Yu family, it had become stupid. Therefore, when there was no one around, as long as the Yu family head called his name, he would be furious and the two of them would start to put on a full-out martial arts show. But this was in front of everyone, so in order to maintain his image for many years, he had to endure it. "This is indeed our Sun family's seat, and we're in the middle of a competition, so it's really not easy for the Yu family head to move around, as it'll affect the fun of others watching the competition." After a long while, Sun Yu gritted his teeth and said. His eyes were even shooting out raging flames. It was a pity that looks couldn't kill. Otherwise, the Yu family head would definitely have died 1,000 times over. "Oh. But the place I'm sitting at shouldn't be considered as your Sun family's seat, right?" The head of the Yu family asked uncertainly, because he was sitting in the aisle. In addition, almost everyone's mind is no longer on the competition. It seems that the unexpected events in the competition can make them more impassioned, especially. "You know." Then, the head of the Yu family continued with an ambiguous expression. You're here on purpose to make me angry, right?" Sun Yu said angrily, almost losing his cool. "How can you wrong me like this? I'm here to show my concern for you." The master of the Yu family felt wronged again. "Thank you. However, I don't need your concern." Sun Yu was filled with hatred. He wasn't a fool. Was he that easy to deceive? This old fogey from the Yu family was clearly here to make a fool of him. Furthermore, it was the kind that would not give up until he angered him to death. Haven't you always been kind to people? Why are you so unfriendly to me? I'm so sad. With our friendship, how could you hurt me like this? The head of the Yu family said pitifully. When the young man behind him saw this, he couldn't help but twitch his mouth and think to himself, is the head of the Yu family addicted to acting? In the immortal realm, who didn't know that the relationship between the two clans was somewhat stiff? What exactly did the master want to do with this? You shut up. Hearing the words of the Yu family head, Sun Ye's forehead was filled with black lines. Fuck. Since when did he have a friendship with this old thing from the Yu family? If it could be said that he would not easily change his expression in front of outsiders and could maintain a kind smile from beginning to end, but in front of this old man from the Yu family, he absolutely could not. Because as long as the two of them met, they would either mock each other or directly fight. In short, the two of them had never been able to get along. Moreover, it was precisely because of this that he would try his best to control his meeting with the old man from the Yu family in public, so as not to expose his true nature. After a long time, everyone knew that the relationship between the two families was not good. Therefore, sometimes, the major families were still willing to cooperate with them and try not to pull them together. But now, this was the elite gathering, he really could not avoid it. It was also because he knew that he would not be able to avoid them like he did in the past that he had ordered his clansmen to stay away from the Yu family's line of sight to avoid attracting this old man to him. However, man proposes but God disposes. This old man still came uninvited. He was depressed. Chapter 1861, Another Trouble, 3, You're shouting at me. The head of the Yu family continued to feel wronged, his dark and shrewd eyes actually welling up with tears. When the young man beside him saw this, he only felt as if a flock of crows had flown over his head, and it seemed like they had pooped quite a lot on his head. It was true. This was the feeling he had. Because the reaction of the family head was simply too shocking. This was a little too much, right? What was the master doing? He was very confused about this. Ah! Damn it, don't give me that look. Upon seeing this, Sun Yu growled in a low voice with a black face. The Sun family members were clearly frightened. Fuck. Did he see a ghost? What they didn't know was that the Yu family head's current performance was all learned from Ji Yun. Seeing Ji Yun's current appearance on the screen, he felt that it was quite interesting. Thus, he casually used it. As for the effect, he was extremely satisfied. Isn't this your favorite look? The head of the Yu family blinked his large, bright eyes and asked with a puzzled expression. These words gave everyone a huge shock. Damn it, when did I like this? Sun Yu saw that the old undying Yu family's old man was being so unreasonable, and his lungs were about to explode. However, he still had to forcibly suppress the anger in his heart. Just thinking about it made him feel very aggrieved, and the Yu family head seemed to have him in the palm of his hand. He was getting more and more addicted to playing with him. On the countless nights we spent together, when we were drinking and singing, you told me yourself that I was the most important person in your heart. Have you forgotten? Or do you not dare to admit it? The Yu family head continued to ask, oh. Under the moonlight and flowers, they had done it before, but they were always scolding or fighting, drinking and singing. The two of them had also done it before, but when they didn't get along, he had smashed the Sun family's garden many times. As for the most important person in his heart, it depended on how others understood. After all, the most important person didn't have to be the person he liked. The enemy was also very important to him. The Yu family head's words made Sun Ye's entire body tremble in anger. The cold air that was released from his body caused the surrounding 100 miles to be immersed in an icy cold atmosphere. They could feel the temperature of the competition grounds suddenly drop. Most people were still confused and couldn't figure out what was going on. Only the two families sitting on the left and right of the Sun family's seat understood. However, at this moment, they were all sizing up the patriarch of the Yu and Sun families with ambiguous looks on their faces. They couldn't help but wonder in their hearts, so the relationship between these two people is so close? It was still widely rumored that they were at odds with each other. It seemed that everyone had been deceived by their smokescreen. However, when they thought about the two's gender, they could understand their difficulties. After all, they were the heads of their respective families. AI. He had no choice. When they thought about the concubines of the Master of the Sun family, they felt that the Master of the Sun family should not have married so many wives. Wasn't this harming others? In comparison, the head of the Yu family only had one wife. With this comparison, the people of the two families immediately felt that the head of the Yu family seemed to be more affectionate. Sensing the strange gazes of the people around him, Sun Ye's expression became more and more unsightly. However, he still held back the monstrous anger in his heart and didn't flare up. However, the change in his expression made it clear to many people that the head of the Sun family wasn't always good-tempered, but he didn't touch his bottom line. And obviously, the head of the Yu family should be his bottom line. The surrounding neighbors looked at the head of the Sun family, then sneaked a glance at the happy head of the Yu family, and suddenly sighed. The Yu family's head was so generous and calm that he didn't care if his secret was discovered. In comparison, the Sun family's head was a little petty, so at this moment, many people chose to stand on the Yu family's head side. As for the Sun family's head, he became a heartless rat in their eyes. From this, it could be seen how powerful the power of the 8 trigrams was. The head of the Yu family saw that the effect he had created was unexpectedly good, and admired Sun Ye's flickering light and dark expression for a while. When he saw that it was good, he patted his butt and left without taking a cloud with him. However, the aggrieved expression he had when he left and the hesitation to speak was really thought-provoking. Not far away. In the Ning family's exclusive seats, the head of the Ning family, who had been watching the movements of the Sun family, naturally saw the interaction between the two family heads. However, in the confrontation just now, the one who had the upper hand was obviously the head of the Yu family. As for Sun Yu, he was afraid that there were too many things that he had no choice but to endure. However, the head of the Ning family knew that Sun Yu was a vengeful person. The Yu family was probably going to be in trouble. However, he believed that since the head of the Yu family dared to provoke him in his face, he must have a plan in mind and should have taken precautions long ago. And the truth was just as Master Ning had guessed. The Yu family and the Sun family had been at odds for many years, and they were both very clear of each other's bottom line. Thus, as long as they didn't touch the other's bottom line, the two families would still maintain a peaceful relationship on the surface, but small disputes in the dark were inevitable. Old man Ning, what are you looking at? At this time, the first elder of the Craftsmen's Guild headquarters couldn't help but ask curiously when he felt that the Ning family's master was absent-minded. I'm looking at the Sun family. I'm afraid they'll do something bad to Shuai. The master of the Ning family said honestly. They dare. If they dare to lay a finger on Shuai, I will make the Sun family disappear from the divine realm. After hearing the words of the master of the Ning family, the great elder immediately became angry. In terms of connections and power, the Sun family could not be compared with him, the great elder of the Craftsmen's Guild. Although the difference in strength between the two was not big, their status in the divine realm was obviously not on the same level. After all, his specialty was refining artifacts, and cultivation was secondary. When the Ning family clansmen and some of the representatives of the Craftsmen's Guild heard the great elder's bold words, they couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. They thought to themselves, Great Elder, do you have to be so excited? However, they could also tell that they could offend anyone but Len Ruoxue. Otherwise, just the Grand Elder, Master Ning, and Uncle Long alone would be enough to make any of the top forces in the divinity disappear from the face of the earth. Thinking of that possibility, they all felt their hair stand on end and their hair stand on end. Why are you so excited? I only said that I was afraid, I didn't say that the Sun family would definitely harm Shuai. The master of the Ning family saw that the great elder was so excited that he couldn't control himself, so he quickly said. I'm afraid it's possible. Don't tell me you don't know the true face of that thing from the Sun family. The great elder said unhappily. People like them who held high positions in the super forces would naturally not be deceived by the fake appearances of others. Therefore, he did not dare to say that he knew everything about the things that the Sun family had done in private. However, he had heard about it. It was just that it was none of his business, and he was not the self-proclaimed savior of the divine world. Therefore, he was too lazy to care about it. However, if the matter involved the little girl Shuai, they naturally could not stand by and watch. So what if I know? He hasn't even made a move yet. The master of the Ning family sighed helplessly. He naturally didn't put the Sun family in his eyes. In addition, that member of the Sun family was a hooligan in public. Therefore, after the end of the elite gathering, the Sun family would definitely be in a terrible fix for a while. After all, this matter had a bad influence on the Sun family. However, he was very curious why the Sun family would do such a despicable act in public. We still have to take precautions. The first elder said anxiously. All of you, calm down. We're going to respond to changes by staying the same. What's the Sun family? Is there a need for you to be so anxious? At this time, Uncle Long, who had closed his eyes and pretended to be asleep, spoke again. No one dared to ignore his words. The first elder and the master of the Ning family listened humbly and put the matter aside for the time being. After all, the elite gathering had not ended yet. It was still too early to think about these things. At the same time, Leng Ruoxue and the others who were in the special space were in trouble again. This time, it was not Leng Ruoxue who had caused trouble, but Zhou Kun. Originally, they had found a place to set up camp and planned to have a good rest. After wandering around aimlessly for days, they felt a little restless, so they wanted to have a good rest before they encountered a strong enemy. However, just as they finished preparing dinner, they met two people who were planning to spend the night in the open. It turned out that the two of them had also taken a liking to the campsite they had found. However, based on the principle of first come, first served, the two of them wanted to discuss with them and give them a portion of the campsite. Leng Ruoxue and the rest saw that the attitude of the two of them was not bad and their abilities were above theirs. They did not want to offend them and thus agreed. However, Zhou Kun was the one who caused the problem. Chapter 1862, Brother Who Had a Sister Complex, 1. At that time, Zhou Kun was resting in the tent, and he didn't even get to cook their dinner. The main reason was that he didn't trust his cooking skills. After the meal was ready, he followed the smell of the food and walked out of the tent. However, before he could pick up the delicious food and enjoy it, he immediately heard a furious voice in his ear. Zhou Kun. It's actually you. One of the two guests roared with a flushed face after seeing Zhou Kun. The veins on his forehead were throbbing, and his eyes were burning with anger. If looks could kill, Zhou Kun would have died thousands of times. Upon seeing such a situation, Leng Ruoxue and the others knew that something was amiss. Judging from the man's reaction, he was definitely not an old friend of Zhou Kun. The two men were both god kings. One of them had a face as white as jade. His skin was even smoother than a woman's. Although he wasn't very tall, he had a graceful bearing and looked like a fine young master. As for the other man, who was the one who was very unfriendly when he saw Zhou Kun, he had a rough face, a tall and burly figure, like a small mountain. However, his skin was slightly dark, and at this moment, his pair of fierce eyes were staring like bronze bells. His fierce expression made people feel fear. Based on the strength of these two, Leng Ruoxue guessed that they could be ranked above average among the god kings. These two were not people that the wretched-looking man from before could compare to. Otherwise, they would not have agreed to give them a portion of the campsite that they could have taken for themselves. However, looking at the situation now, it seemed that things were going to be ruined. Just as Leng Ruoxue and the others were thinking of a solution, Zhou Kun, who had just walked out of the tent, looked at the man who had spoken in a daze and asked in puzzlement, "Who are you? Do I know you?" Upon hearing this, Leng Ruoxue and the others were all speechless. They couldn't help but secretly sigh to themselves. Zhou Kun actually forgot about her, but she obviously remembered him in her heart. What should they do now? Leng Ruoxue and the others were at a loss for what to do. When the man heard Zhou Kun's words, the anger in his heart grew even more intense. He yelled at the top of his voice again without caring about his image, "You dare to say you don't know me? Do you still remember Lu Lin?" Lu Lin. Upon hearing the name, Zhou Kun appeared even more confused. The name did sound familiar, but he really couldn't remember. "Lu Lin is my sister. Lu Sen." Lu Sen said with a gloomy face. "What's your sister to me?" Zhou Kun was a little puzzled. "What a heartless man. Lu Lin lost her life for you, and you've even forgotten who she is." At that moment, the man beside Lu Sen spoke and looked at Zhou Kun with an unfriendly gaze. "Are you sure I know this Lu Lin? Do you have any evidence? Don't slander me." Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun said in a slightly displeased manner. To be honest, there were too many women around him. Some of them followed him willingly, and of course, some were forced by him. However, it was impossible for him to remember all the women's names. For example, Lu Lin was one of the women he had forgotten, if he had really had this woman by his side before. "You want evidence? Good. I'll give it to you now," Lu Sen said coldly. After that, he took out a jade tablet from his storage ring, which was engraved with the word Zhou. He handed the jade tablet to Zhou Kun and said gloomily, "You dare to say that you don't recognize this jade plate?" Of course I recognize this jade plate, but even if I have this jade plate, it can't prove anything, right?" Zhou Kun argued. In fact, as his women, every one of them had such a jade tablet on them. Therefore, he was very afraid that Lu Sen was deliberately using the jade tablet to deceive him. He naturally had to be more careful. "What about this?" Lu Sen squinted his eyes and took out a stack of papers from his storage ring. It was a thick stack of hundreds of papers. "These are all love letters you wrote to my sister. You used sweet words to cheat her of her innocence and then abandoned her, causing her to commit suicide. I won't let you off." In fact, he had long wanted to get rid of Zhou Kun and avenge his sister. Unfortunately, his family did not allow him to act rashly. After all, the Zhou family was more powerful than the Lu family. However, this was a great opportunity. Moreover, he believed that no one would be able to say anything if he were to kill Zhou Kun here. After all, the rule here was that life and death were determined by fate. More importantly, the rules of the competition did not state that high-level contestants were not allowed to kill people who were weaker than them. This could be considered a loophole in the elite competition. After all, no one had expected an accident to happen in this year's elite gathering. Lu Sen and the rest only realized that there was a slip-up in this competition after they saw Leng Ruoxue and the others. After seeing Zhou Kun, Lu Sen felt that it was a great opportunity. He had been worried about not having a reason to kill Zhou Kun to avenge his sister. On the other hand, it was perfectly justifiable to kill Zhou Kun here. At least, it would not bring trouble to the family. After all, the rules of the competition were clear. Therefore, he decided to make good use of the rules of the competition to achieve his goal. Although he looked boorish, he was actually very meticulous. Therefore, he had already thought about the consequences of killing Zhou Kun thousands of times in his heart. No matter which one it was, it would be better to do it here. However, he did not expect to have the opportunity to meet Zhou Kun here, so he was not fully prepared. However, Zhou Kun's strength was below his, so it was not difficult to kill him. As for these few people, since they were with Zhou Kun, they must be his accomplices. As the saying goes, one is marked by one's proximity to vermilion, and one is marked by one's proximity to ink. These few people were probably not good people either. He also took Leng Ruoxue for granted and regarded her as Zhou Kun's woman. After all, Zhou Kun's lecherous nature was well known to everyone. Hence, a woman who was willing to follow Zhou Kun here to fool around would definitely not be a woman from a decent family. For a moment, Lu Sen's mind was filled with thoughts. Leng Ruoxue and the others were also quickly determined by him. However, it was fortunate that Leng Ruoxue did not let Qing Ju probe Lu Sen's thoughts. Otherwise, they would be depressed to death. When Leng Ruoxue and the rest heard Lu Sen's words, they could not help but look at the thick stack of so-called love letters. The black lines on their foreheads deepened. Zhou Kun really didn't look like someone who had the patience to write love letters. How could he put in so much effort for a woman? Leng Ruoxue and the rest looked at Zhou Kun curiously and in surprise. Zhou Kun's face turned red from their incredulous gazes. Who didn't have a few youthful years? Although he could no longer remember what Lu Lin looked like, he had indeed written love letters to women before. However, those love letters were all ghostwritten, so how could he have written such literary and nauseating words? Chapter 1863, Brother who had a sister complex, 2. Now that he had seen the so-called evidence in Lu Sen's hands, he couldn't be sure of the authenticity of those love letters for a while. After all, although those love letters were sent by him, he had never read them. He only knew that they were very corny. Even if Lu Sen showed him those love letters, he was still at a loss. What's wrong? Do you still want to renege on your debt? Your signature is on it. Seeing the hesitation on Zhou Kun's face, Lu Sen was furious. So what? That doesn't mean that Lu Lin is related to me, right? Who knows if you're the one who forged it? Zhou Kun said with a suspicious look on his face. Anyway, he would not acknowledge this thing, let alone acknowledge it. Otherwise, if Leng Ruoxue knew about his past love history, he was afraid that she would fly into a rage. Fortunately, Leng Ruoxue was unaware of Zhou Kun's thoughts at that moment. Otherwise, she would have said to him earnestly, Zhou Kun, you're overthinking it. Upon hearing that Zhou Kun was indeed going to renege on his debt, Lu Sen was instantly infuriated. He waved his fist and attacked Zhou Kun. The wind from his fist was mixed with the power to topple mountains and overturn the seas. Zhou Kun was so frightened that his face turned pale when he saw the menacing fist. He turned around and jumped, hiding behind Ji Yun. Upon seeing that, Ji Yun gritted his teeth in anger. He turned around gently and pushed Zhou Kun away again. The wind from the fist, which was emitting a frighteningly cold air, brushed past half of Zhou Kun's body. Zhou Kun immediately felt a heart-wrenching pain. Seeing this, Lu Sen sneered and said, "It seems like your companions don't like you." Ha ha ha. He didn't expect that he hadn't even made a move yet. The other party started killing each other. Very good. Although things were a little out of his expectations, the result would not change. Zhou Kun was dead for sure. As for Zhou Kun's bad friends, he did not intend to let them off. Otherwise, it would be difficult for him to avenge his sister. However, he did not intend to let them die a quick death. After all, a game of cat and mouse was more of a fun game. In his eyes, Leng Ruoxue and the others were just mice. Ji Yun. How can you be a traitor? Upon hearing Lu Sen's words, Zhou Kun held his numb arm and said with a look of resentment. I'm scared. That was just an instinctive reaction. Ji Yun said with an innocent expression, but he couldn't help but think in his heart, this detestable fellow, he's clearly coming for you, yet he still wants to use me as a shield. Humph. Was he that easy to make use of? Zhou Kun was furious. However, could he blame Ji Yun at this point in time? After all, he had indeed been careless just now. More importantly, he desperately needed the help of Ji Yun and the others. If they left him in the lurch, then this Lu Sen would definitely kill him without hesitation. In fact, Zhou Kun was a very selfish man. At this time, he only thought of getting Ji Yun to help him deal with Lu Sen, but he didn't think that even if they joined forces, they would be no match for Lu Sen and Zhou Kun. Seeing Lu Sen's murderous look, fear emerged in his heart. It was precisely because of this that he was even more eager to capture Ji Yun and the others. Otherwise, wouldn't he have no helpers? What did I do? Ji-yun blinked his limpid eyes as he asked, his face filled with confusion. When it came to playing dumb, no one could compare to him. You can't just leave me in the lurch. Zhou Kun gritted his teeth and said while suppressing his anger. Why can't I? We're not even close. Ji-yun was puzzled. If he remembered correctly, they weren't friends. We're allies now. Zhou Kun reminded her with a dark expression. But you brought this trouble on yourself. It's your private matter, so it's not good for us to interfere. Ji-yun was in a difficult position. In fact, it was not that he did not want to help Zhou Kun, but Zhou Kun's performance just now had made him too angry. Moreover, the two men were stronger than them. He could even sense that they were much stronger than the wretched man from before. It was already difficult for them to deal with one wretched man. He was not confident that he could deal with two at once. Most importantly, he did not want to risk his life for Zhou Kun. It was really not worth it. Ha ha ha. You really do know your own limits. However, even if you don't interfere, you'll still be dead. Upon hearing Ji-yun's words, Lu Sin laughed happily. Damn Zhou Kun, he must have finally experienced the feeling of being deserted by his loved ones. In the past, in order to avenge his sister, he had been threatened by his own clansmen because they were afraid of being implicated by him. He still remembered the loneliness and despair he felt at that time. His only sister, who he relied on for survival, was the closest person to him in the world. Due to the weak relationship between the clansmen, he could not immediately avenge her and had been enduring it for many years. Now that he had a good position in the clan, he finally had such a good opportunity for revenge. Therefore, he would definitely not let Zhou Kun off. Moreover, he believed that the clansmen would definitely not say anything this time, because it was too late even if they were still afraid of the Zhou family. Ha ha ha. As soon as he thought about his sister's revenge, the depression that had accumulated in his heart for many years was swept away. At this time, he felt even more refreshed and his spirit was also shaken. The moment he saw Zhou Kun, the hatred in his heart was triggered, and now that he finally had the chance to take revenge, he immediately felt relieved. However, what followed was overwhelming exhaustion. Yes. In order to find an opportunity to avenge his sister, he had endured hardships for many years. Now that the big stone in his heart finally had a chance to be lifted, he relaxed and seemed to have lost his goal. Previously, his sister's hatred had supported him, making him disregard everything and use any means to snatch, and strive for the opportunity to rise up. But now, he was about to get his revenge. What was he going to live for in the future? He was at a loss. After hearing Lu Sen's words, Ji-yun pouted unhappily and said indifferently, "We're not the ones who killed your sister, why should we die with him?" Ji-yun was very upset because the consequences would be very serious. Originally, he had some sympathy for Lu Sen's sister's encounter. After all, Zhou Kun was really not a good person. However, who knew that this person would not distinguish between right and wrong and even want to kill them as well? He could not agree to this. He had not lived long enough. He had yet to get married, so how could he be buried with Zhou Kun? Aren't you his allies? To be able to form an alliance with a person like him, it can't be anything good. As his scoundrel friends, I'm sure they've done a lot of bad things for him, so I feel that I have the obligation to help the heavens. Lu Sen said matter-of-factly. Hearing Lu Sen's words, Lin Ruoxue and the rest were completely speechless. Wasn't this Lu Sen a little too imaginative? Although they didn't care much about Zhou Kun's life or death, they couldn't be wrongly accused by Lu Sr. What an obligation. Do you think you're the savior? To tell you the truth, our family and Zhou Kun have a feud. As for our alliance, it's only temporary. Besides, we've never helped him do anything bad. So, don't take it for granted that we're jackals of the same tribe just because we're together. We're not the same. Ji-yun shouted loudly after hearing Lu Sen's words, and his handsome face turned red with anger. Damn it, I never dreamed that I would be involved with Zhou-kun one day. Not only that, but I might also die with him. Sob. He was really depressed. Chapter 1864, Brother Who Had a Sister Complex, 3, Do you think he'll believe you just because you said that? Lu Sen obviously did not believe Ji Yun's words and even scoffed at his words. He was certain that Ji Yun was Zhou-kun's friend because he was very afraid of death. In fact, Ji Yun was not afraid of death. He just did not want to die together with Zhou-kun. Otherwise, he would probably die of grievance before he was killed. Then what do I have to do to make you believe me? Ji Yun asked with great patience. However, he was already going crazy in his heart. No matter what you say, I won't believe your nonsense. Lu Sen's cold gaze was like a venomous snake as he stared at Ji Yun. When Ji Yun heard this, he simply shut his mouth. Since the other party had already said this, what else could he say? He had nothing more to say, but he felt really wronged. At the thought of this, he turned his resentful gaze to Leng Ruoxue. The message in his eyes seemed to be saying, Ruoxue, we're going to die here. Sob. I think it's better to accompany Zhou-kun. Leng Ruoxue saw through Ji Yun's thoughts and smiled helplessly. She turned to Lu Sen and said, is it because no matter how we explain it, it'll just be an excuse in your eyes? Of course, the truth is right in front of you. There's no need to explain. Lu Sen said stubbornly. Upon hearing Leng Ruoxue's words, Zhou-kun's heart sank, and an ominous premonition welled up in his heart. Were they going to give up on him? Previously, he could have ignored Ji Yun's words. However, now that Leng Ruoxue had expressed her attitude, he felt as if a knife was being twisted in his heart. However, no one cared about his thoughts now. After all, the other party was his old debt. You're really, Lu Sen's words made Leng Ruoxue speechless. It seemed that no matter what they said, they were only talking to Niu Tanqin. In that case, she might as well fight him. After all, she didn't want to die in Lu Sen's hands, especially if she was implicated by Zhou-kun. At the thought of this, Leng Ruoxue immediately sent a voice transmission to her baby and made some arrangements. Following that, she transmitted a message to Ji Yun and the rest. It looks like the other party is stubborn. Let's fight. But they're both stronger than us. Can we beat them? Ji Yun was somewhat worried. We have to fight even if we can't win. Otherwise, we'll really have to die with Zhou-kun. Are you willing to do that? Leng Ruoxue retorted. Of course I'm not willing. Even if I'm going to die, I can't die with him. Ji Yun said gloomily. Then we can only fight. You just need to focus on dealing with Lu Senator, leave the other person to me. Leng Ruoxue made the arrangements. Ruoxue, don't tell me you've taken a fancy to that pretty boy. When he heard that Leng Ruoxue was going to deal with another relatively handsome man, Ji Yun said in an upset tone. What nonsense are you saying? It's the baby who chose him. It thinks that Lu Sen's skin is too thick. Leng Ruoxue glared at him with her beautiful eyes. Oh. Upon hearing this, Ji Yun felt relieved. He thought that Ruoxue was going to use her beauty to seduce him. So he wanted his baby to deal with that man. However, baby was such a small beastie. Could it deal with that man? He was skeptical about this. Look at my eyes later, we'll do it together. Leng Ruoxue continued. N. Ji Yun and the others replied, their expressions still unmoved. Of course, Leng Ruoxue had also informed Zhou-kun of the news that they were going to fight with the other party. After hearing the news, Zhou-kun was almost overjoyed. He was finally relieved. At least Leng Ruoxue and the others had not abandoned him. This fact also made him look at Leng Ruoxue with even more tender eyes. What was a friend in need? This was clearly the case. Miss Leng must be reluctant to let him, this indomitable and handsome man, die at such a young age. Therefore, regardless of the disparity in strength, she was determined to fight with the other party. In this regard, he clearly felt that his wildly beating heart was even more heated. Fortunately, Leng Ruoxue was unaware of Zhou Kun's current thoughts. Otherwise, she would definitely regret making this decision because it had obviously caused Zhou Kun to misunderstand her. She did not make this choice for the sake of Zhou Kun's life. In fact, it did not matter to her if Zhou Kun was one more or one less person. Ignoring Zhou Kun's affectionate gaze, Leng Ruoxue turned her beautiful eyes to Lu Sen and the other man. She smiled and confirmed, "Are you sure you want to kill us as well?" "Of course. We have to get rid of evil for the people," Lu Sen said with certainty, while the man beside him looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated. At first, he wanted to persuade Lu Sen not to involve the innocent. After all, apart from Zhou Kun, no one else had anything to do with Lu Lin's death. However, he knew that his good friend had been suffering from the hatred of his sister for many years, and the hatred in his heart had accumulated to an unimaginable extent. If he was not allowed to vent it out properly, this matter was very likely to become Lu Sen's inner demon. Therefore, out of selfishness for his friend, he did not stop Lu Sen's idea. However, it was because of this mistake that the two of them ended up in a tragedy that could not be salvaged. What a good, getting rid of evil for the people. Do you also think so? Leng Ruoxue squinted her beautiful eyes and turned her gaze towards the man beside Lu Sen as she asked. Faced with Leng Ruoxue's doubts, the man opened his mouth, but in the end, he only sighed softly, tacitly agreeing with Lu Sen's actions. Since that's the case, we naturally want sit still and wait for death. Although your strength is above ours, we may not necessarily lose to you, Leng Ruoxue said confidently. What a shameless woman, not even afraid of spicking her tongue when talking big. Lu Sen despised Leng Ruoxue's words. Shameless? How am I shameless? Hearing this, Leng Ruoxue was confused. This was her first time meeting Lu Sen, so how could he be so sure that she was a shameless woman? If these words had come from a woman's mouth, she might not have been too angry. After all, it could have been out of jealousy. However, these words came from a man's mouth. She could not accept it and the anger in her heart was rising. If Lu Sen didn't make things clear today, she would let him know why flowers were so red. Will the woman who is with Zhou Kun be a decent woman? Lu Sen said. Your sister used to be with Zhou Kun too. Leng Ruoxue reminded him with a faint smile. She was not supposed to bring up the dead, but Lu Sen had gone too far. Not only did he think that she had something to do with Zhou Kun, but he had also overturned a whole boat of people. What's wrong with the woman who was with Zhou Kun? Could it be that Zhou Kun had denied the innocence of all women just because he had been a heartless man? Originally, Leng Ruoxue had some sympathy for Lu Sen's pain of losing his sister. But now, because of Lu Sen's few words, the little bit of sympathy she had for Lu Sen disappeared without a trace. As the saying goes, a pitiful person must have a hateful side. A woman who committed suicide for love seemed to be deeply in love, but in fact, she was not worthy of other people's sympathy at all. If you really wanted the other party to regret and take revenge, you could only live a carefree life, better than the other party, and ruthlessly step on the other party. Suicide was the most cowardly act to escape from reality. And what she hated the most was this kind of behavior. However, the beauty had passed away, and it had nothing to do with her, so she naturally wouldn't meddle in other people's business and casually express any opinion. But now, Lu Sen was pointing the spearhead at her, which was something she could not tolerate. Even the man beside Lu Sen frowned slightly when he heard Lu Sen's words. He obviously did not agree with his extreme statement, but he did not say anything. How can my sister be the same as you women? When Lu Sen heard Leng Ruoxue mention his sister, he was instantly enraged. Because in his heart, his sister was the most perfect. No other woman could compare to her. Even if the woman in front of him was 1,000,000 times more beautiful than his sister, she could not be compared to his sister. That's right. Your sister is much more useless than us. She was just abandoned by a man, and she actually committed suicide. In the face of such a stubborn and unreasonable brother who had a sister complex, she felt really helpless. What she said might not sound pleasant, but it was the truth because she believed that it must be a cruel fact that Lu Xun had always been unwilling to face. Otherwise, he might not have been able to hold on until now to attack Zhou Kun after losing his most important family member. After hearing Leng Ruoxu's words, Lu Xun's anger immediately soared to the sky, and his body suddenly burst into raging flames like a fire-breathing dragon. His slightly sinister eyes glared at Leng Ruoxu fiercely, and his gaze was even more intense than when he was staring at Zhou Kun. Chapter 1865, Extreme Joy Begets Sorrow. 1. Leng Ruoxu smiled faintly as she looked at Lu Xun, who was like a fire-breathing dragon. She fearlessly met his gaze and looked straight at him. One of their eyes was as calm as water while the other was as furious as fire. They stared at each other. When Ji Yun, the others, and the man saw this, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly for fear of disturbing the strange atmosphere between them. After a long time, Lu Xun couldn't help but shift his fiery eyes away. His heart was filled with frustration. At this moment, his entire body was drenched in sweat. Although he had not been staring at Leng Ruoxu for long, he could feel an invisible pressure enveloping his body. He had never felt this kind of feeling before. When Lu Xun shifted his gaze away, Leng Ruoxu smiled nonchalantly and continued to provoke him. What's wrong? You want to kill me with your eyes just because you can't win? It's a pity that your gaze is too weak. It can't take on a physical form and can't scare me. Leng Ruoxu's words were definitely infuriating and hurt one's self-esteem. However, what she said was the truth. After all, she even dared to look straight into the eyes of a reverent god, let alone a mere divine king. A mere god king, of course she wouldn't put him in her eyes. When Lu Xun heard Leng Ruoxu's words, he flew into a rage. However, Leng Ruoxu didn't take it to heart and looked at him as if he was a clown. She smiled and said, "Don't jump up and down in front of me. I don't like monkeys and I don't have any bananas for you." In other words, Lu Xun was a monkey who liked to eat bananas. "Did you just call me a monkey?" Leng Ruoxu's words suddenly caused Lu Xun to calm down. He squinted his eyes and asked, You're not too stupid, you know that I'm talking about you." Leng Ruoxu praised with a smile. What a sharp-tongued, unruly woman who likes to show off her tongue. I'll teach you a lesson later." Lu Xun's face was gloomy as he threatened. "As you wish. However, I want to know if there's something wrong with your eyesight. I'm such a young and beautiful woman, how can I be a wicked woman in your eyes?" Leng Ruoxu asked in confusion, but she was not angry. If she's not a wicked woman, what else can she be if she's willing to be Zhou Kun's woman? Lu Xun was old at adjusting the bullet's trajectory, as if he was particularly concerned about this matter. Otherwise, he would not have kept digging for himself. What a strong sense of jealousy. Do you like Zhou Kun too? In addition, if Zhou Kun's women can be considered as wicked women, your sister is one of them. Leng Ruoxu suddenly realized something and reminded him. Then, she continued, "AI. No wonder you hate Zhou Kun to the core. It turns out that it's not just because of your sister. Actually, you really don't have to do this. Although Zhou Kun likes women more, it doesn't mean that he doesn't like men. If the two of them like the same man, it might even become a good story." Following Leng Ruoxu's words, Zhou Kun and Lu Xun's faces began to turn ugly, especially Lu Xun, who was so angry that he wanted to strangle the woman in front of him immediately. This damned woman was too abominable. Not only did she slander his reputation, but she also dragged his deceased sister into the mess. She was really intolerable. He only knew how to resent Leng Ruoxu's vicious words in his heart, but he had never thought that Leng Ruoxu would not have said those words if he had not kept using Zhou Kun's woman as an excuse. Compared to Lu Xun's forbearance, Zhou Kun's reaction was more direct. "I don't want to like him, I only like women." Zhou Kun was a little afraid that Leng Ruoxu would force the two of them into a pile, so he quickly shouted. Upon hearing Zhou Kun's words, Lu Sen, who had almost forgotten about Zhou Kun's existence due to Lin Ruoxia's anger, shouted, I don't like you either. Don't think too highly of yourself. Lu Sen gritted his teeth when he said this. However, his tone sounded like he was acting coquettishly out of embarrassment. Seeing this, Ji Yun couldn't help but ask, You're that Lu Sen, right? If you have something to say it properly and don't quarrel. You'll scare Zhou Kun with your fierce look. If he doesn't want you, you'll be the one crying. His words were sincere and earnest, but it also successfully made Lu Sen transfer his anger to him. What did you just say? I dare you to say that again. Lu Sen's eyes widened in anger as he furiously roared at Ji Yun. When Ji Yun heard the thunderous roar, he was so frightened that he shrank his neck and whispered, Too fierce, he's too fierce. You can't do this. Zhou Kun won't like you even if you're so fierce. He's always liked women who are like little birds who rely on others and are as gentle as water. So, you have to change your temper. Hearing Ji Yun's words, Lin Ruoxia and the rest almost laughed out loud in their hearts. Ji Yun's ability to anger people wasn't small. Lu Sen's face was at least 100 times uglier than before. Young master, I'm afraid it's impossible for Lu Sen to change his appearance to Zhou Kun's, unless he can change his gender. Ji Tao added fuel to the fire. We can help him with this. Ji Wu interjected. How can we help? Ji Yun didn't know what was going on, so he asked in a daze. Can't we just give him a stab? Ji Wu said indifferently. The three of them were in a heated discussion, and Zhou Kun, who was sulking and spurting fire from his body, was completely ignored by them. That makes sense. Lu Sen, let's help you change your gender. As long as I cut you, you will no longer be a man. Ji Yun's words were very reserved, and he suggested with a smile. I don't need it. Lu Sen was burning with anger. He had decided that he would not let these people die too easily. Before they died, he would let them experience the feeling of changing their gender. Otherwise, it would be difficult to dispel the hatred in his heart. When the young man at the side heard the words of Ji Yun and the others, he looked at Lu Sen's reaction and knew that these people would not be able to come to a good end today. However, after hearing Lu Sen's words, Ji Yun did not give up and continued to persuade him, Lu Sen, we're doing this for you and Zhou Kun's own good. If you don't change your gender, Zhou Kun won't like you. So, don't be stubborn. Even if he has changed gender, I will still not like him. Without giving Lu Sen a chance to react, Zhou Kun, who was so frightened that his face turned pale, quickly protested loudly. However, at this moment, his words did not carry any weight at all. On the other side, Lu Sen's chest heaved up and down as he was so angry that his face turned darker and darker. He stared at Lin Ruoxia and the rest like a venomous snake, as if he could swallow them up at any time. Seeing his expression, Ji Yun asked worriedly, Ruoxia, is he poisoned? You look terrible. He's not poisoned, he's sick. Lin Ruoxia smiled and played along. Arg. If you're sick, you must be treated. Ji Yun said, slightly surprised. How can we decide whether to treat him or not? However, if his illness isn't properly treated, I can guarantee that he will definitely die in front of us. Lin Ruoxia said with certainty. Chapter 1866, Extreme Joy Begets Sorrow, 2, then he's really pitiful. Ji Yun began to sympathize with him. Have you ever heard of this saying? A pitiful person must have a hateful side. Lin Ruoxia chuckled as she asked. N. Ji Yun nodded furiously, even though he had never heard of such words. I'm talking about the two of them. Lin Ruoxia made her words even clearer. She had no choice. She was afraid that Lu Sen could not understand her. Damn it, all of you can die now. Listening to their exchange of words as if there was no one else around, Lu Sen was completely enraged. He clenched his fists tightly and swung them towards Lin Ruoxia and the others. The fist's ruthless aura was accompanied by a gust of wind. It transformed into a ferocious black beast and pounced towards Lin Ruoxia and the others. When Leng Ruoxue saw this, she quickly gave Ji Yun and the others a look. The few of them immediately scattered like birds and beasts. When the ferocious beast saw that it had missed its target, it became even more furious. Black smoke rose from its black exterior. The beast roared and pounced towards Leng Ruoxue with its fangs bared. When Leng Ruoxue saw that the giant beast conjured from divine power was heading towards her, her heart was filled with anger. Damn it, isn't this bullying? Did she look weak? Ji Yun, who was not far away, saw that Leng Ruoxue had been entangled by the giant beast conjured by Lu's senator. He immediately grew anxious and spread his legs to run towards Leng Ruoxue. Seeing this, Ji Wu and Ji Tao had no choice but to follow. Who asked them to be afraid that Ji Yun would be injured? Furthermore, they could tell that as long as it was related to Leng Ruoxue, it was impossible to clear Ji Yun's mind. Big black guy. What's so good about you bullying a woman? Come at me if you have the ability. Ji Yun shouted as he ran, trying to attract Lu Sen's attention. After all, the giant beast was under Lu Sen's control. However, Lu Sen remained unmoved. He continued to control the giant beast and prepared to deal with Leng Ruoxue. Seeing this, Ji Yun felt helpless. He really couldn't understand how Lu Sen could make things so difficult for an innocent woman. Could it be that what they had imagined was true? That Lu Sen liked Zhou Kun? Was that why the women around Zhou Kun had become a thorn in Lu Sen's side? In fact, unless Lu Sen personally told him the reason, he would never be able to figure out the reason why Lu Sen was acting this way. Lu Sen was acting this way out of pure hatred. His sister had died because of Zhou Kun. How could Zhou Kun have another woman by his side? Zhou Kun had to stay by his sister's side for the rest of his life. If his sister could not have a man, other women naturally should not, and they were not qualified to have one either. Therefore, Leng Ruoxue, who was suspected to be Zhou Kun's woman, was completely targeted by Lu's senator. Other than this reason, the words that Leng Ruoxue had said previously had thoroughly infuriated Lu's senator. This had also caused the narrow-minded Lu Sen to hate Leng Ruoxue to the core. Hence, the first person he had to get rid of was the sharp-tongued Leng Ruoxue. However, Leng Ruoxue's opponent was not Lu's senator. Hence, she would naturally not go head-to-head with Lu's senator. After sending a voice transmission to Ji Yun and the other two, the three of them, who were about to run to Leng Ruoxue, turned back and took the initiative to find Lu Sen, surrounding him. At this time, the pale-faced Zhou Kun was also threatened by Leng Ruoxue. He unwillingly strode in front of Lu Sen and glared at him. This was because Leng Ruoxue had already said that if he did not put in any effort and only wanted to sit back and enjoy the fruits of others' labor, they would watch him die and let Lu Sen kill him first before dealing with Lu Sen. Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun was, of course, afraid, and the little bit of suspicion he had immediately disappeared without a trace. In fact, the reason why Leng Ruoxue said that was because she could tell that Zhou Kun did not want to contribute at all. He only wanted to use them to deal with Lu Sen so that he could resolve his crisis. Unfortunately, they were not that easy to make use of. You guys are not my match. Looking at the four people surrounding him, Lu Sen arrogantly shouted. Ha ha ha. Of course, we're no match for you in a one-on-one fight, but I'm not so sure about a group fight. Ji Tao said with a smile. Today, they were going to continue the grand scene of ants biting an elephant to death. I don't think it's a group fight. Lu Sen was very confident. They had two people on their side. If it was 4 against 1, he really didn't have much confidence. But now, the scales of victory were clearly leaning towards them. However, he soon knew what it meant to be overjoyed. This was because when he was being entangled by Ji Yun's group of 4, his good friend had not stepped forward to help as he had expected. By the time he had discovered that something was wrong, the young man had already been entangled by his treasure and the other little beasts. He did not know when, but the giant beast that he had conjured had disappeared. Instead, a few small beasts appeared out of thin air. Other than the purple fox that he had seen before, there was a white fox and a black fox. They were all dainty and looked very cute. These 3 small beasts were obviously Leng Ruoxue's. Could it be that that woman was also a fox? Otherwise, why would all the beastie beasts be foxes? Lu Sen's imagination ran wild as he dealt with the attacks of Ji Yun and the others. Seeing Lu Sen's absent-mindedness, Ji Yun became angry. Damn you big black guy, can't you just focus? Humph. It's enough to deal with you too. Lu Sen said confidently. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a pu sound was heard. His left shoulder was hit by Ji Wu. Well, see. This is the result of you multitasking, sigh. Focus. You'll definitely regret underestimating us. Ji Yun kindly reminded him. The divine skill in his hand was repeatedly thrown at Lu Senator. Although it might not hit him all the time, it was good to give him some trouble. On the other side, the young man was annoyed by the three little foxes who were as slippery as loaches. These three little guys were really too hateful. Not only did they take turns to provoke him, but they also discussed which part of his body was more resistant to scratches. Listening to their conversation as if no one was around, the young man was extremely angry. Among the three little foxes, Baby and Chi used shadowless claws without any pattern, scratching wherever they wanted to. In contrast, Mei was much more elegant, and its hands were mostly on the chest and above. The three of them had already arranged their order beforehand. They attacked in order and then quickly left. The young man could only feel pain in his body and could not catch any of them. This fact made the young man furious. The burning pain that came from his body and face also made him extremely angry. If these detestable little beasts were caught by him, they would be dead for sure. The young man made a decision in his heart. He glanced at the three little foxes some distance away from him and deliberately made a show of weakness. However, the three little beasts did not fall for it at all. The three little fellows were tired of attacking and even jumped onto a tree not far away to rest. The young man was even angrier when he saw this. Chapter 1867, Extreme Joy Begets Sorrow, 3. In his entire life, he had never seen such an infuriating little beast. When he thought of this, he couldn't help but turn his gaze towards Leng Ruoxue, who was watching the show. He then shifted his gaze towards Leng Ruoxue. Just when he thought that he could capture Leng Ruoxue and threaten the three little beasts, Leng Ruoxue had suddenly disappeared from his sight. In the blink of an eye, she was already a few thousand meters away from him. Was this teleportation? The young man squinted his shrewd eyes. He was surprised. What a fast reaction and speed. A god-tier master actually ran away from him, a god king. This was unbelievable. However, it was also because of this that Leng Ruoxue had attracted the young man's interest. His family was known for their teleportation skills, and he was one of the heirs who had been nurtured by his family. However, he did not expect Leng Ruoxue to open his eyes. No wonder his family's ancestor always said that there would always be someone better. Is this teleportation? The young man wanted to be more certain. Why should I tell you? Leng Ruoxue did not answer but asked instead. Looking at the claw marks on the young man's handsome face, she really wanted to laugh out loud. The charm was scratching so affectionately that it even scratched the young man's face and said, "Men who bully women are all bad guys." Looking at the clear claws, Leng Ruoxue was full of admiration for the mice creativity. She didn't expect Mei to have such a mischievous side. She was really too cute. If you tell me, I can guarantee that Sun will let you live. How about it? The young man didn't seem to realize that someone had written words on his face. He even arrogantly started to negotiate with Leng Ruoxue. Do you think he can say that you can kill us? Leng Ruoxue could not help but sneer at the young man's words. Why were the people she had met recently so full of themselves? She could not understand. The difference in strength can't be made up for by external forces, even if you have more people than us. The young man was as confident as Lu Senator. He was overconfident in his own abilities. Unfortunately, his opponent was Leng Ruoxue. Leng Ruoxue was never one to play by the rules. If her opponent was stronger than her, she would not force herself to fight with force. Instead, she would choose to use other methods to deal with her opponent, such as drugging him. Just as Leng Ruoxue was speaking, a colorless and odorless powder had already been sprinkled out by her. That powder was not poisonous, but it would make a person's entire body sore and weak. It would also cause a numbing sensation. In short, that feeling would definitely leave a lasting aftertaste. Haven't you heard of the phrase, extreme joy begets sorrow? Leng Ruoxue asked with a smile. I believe in strength more. The young man had a confident smile. Oh, really? However, you'll soon know what it's like to have extreme joy turn into sorrow. Leng Ruoxue laughed evilly and gave the three little beasts who were resting on the tree a look. The three little beasts understood and charged towards the young man like three bolts of three-colored lightning. The three beasts were extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, they were in front of the young man. The young man did not even have time to react before he was scratched again. The purple, white, and black shadows flickered up and down, and the number of claw marks on the young man's body nearly doubled. The young man was so entangled that he had no time to teach the three beasts a lesson. After scratching enough, the treasure even wickedly tore off the young man's clothes that had already been torn into strips of cloth, and suddenly, the young man's naked body was exposed. Arg! You lecherous fox! After shouting, the young man fell limply to the ground. At this time, the young man's snow-white body was covered with claw marks of different sizes and depths. Many of the claw marks were still bleeding, but this was already the result of the three claws showing mercy. Otherwise, the young man's end would have been even worse. At once, the succubus transformed into a bolt of lightning and rushed into Leng Ruoxue's arms. It used its big, furry tail to cover its master's eyes. It had wanted to use its claws, but it had just scratched someone and had not washed them yet. So, it could not touch its master. Leng Ruoxue removed the large tail that was covering her eyes and smiled helplessly. Then, she touched the mice head and laughed, May, there's nothing good about him, what are you worried about? He's a man. The May only said this one sentence and swallowed the rest of the words back into its stomach. In fact, the possessiveness of these beasts was as strong as that of demons. In their hearts, their master belonged to them. Therefore, unless it was a male creature that they had identified, any man who wanted to get close to their master would be killed. None of them would have a good ending. At the thought of this, Mei Mai's beautiful purple eyes turned to Zhou Kun and Ji Yun thoughtfully. These two men. Hee. Its purple eyes flashed with slyness. Its master was not someone who could be easily entangled with. That stupid pig named Zhou Kun definitely did not have the qualifications to be master's ordinary friend. As for Ji Yun, she was still observing him. However, if the demonic man knew of his existence, he would probably have a hard time. At the thought of this, a faint smile appeared on Charm's furry little face. It looked like it was going to be lively again. Ah! The words, May, made Leng Ruoxue's forehead fill with black lines. Right now, she was a little suspicious as to whether her beastie had been bribed by the evildoer. After all, in her memory, only the evildoer would do such a thing. In the short span of a few days, she had already enjoyed such behavior a few times. Master! You'll get a sty if you look at the body of the opposite sex. The May said softly. When she said this, her originally white fur on her fluffy face had a faint pink color. Ah! I don't see him as a man. In my eyes, he's just a corpse. Leng Ruoxue glanced at the weak young man and said disapprovingly. Even so, he's still a man. If the demon finds out about this, the charm demon stopped mid-sentence and stared at Leng Ruoxue with its beautiful purple eyes, as if warning her to be careful. There's a big vinegar jar at home. Ah. All right then. Leng Ruoxue was helpless. Why were the humans and beasts around her so possessive? When she thought of this, she gloomily looked at Ji Yun and the others and loudly said, Ji Yun, we've already settled things here. Why are you still not done? Arg! It'll be done in a minute. After Ji Yun finished speaking, he stole a glance at Leng Ruoxue. Then, his attacks became increasingly fierce. Although Ji Yun's attacks appeared to be chaotic, they were actually very well thought out. Leng Ruoxue only needed to observe him for a moment before she discovered the true nature of his attacks. What kind of attack was that? Real and fake, both real and fake, contained an unparalleled offensive power. If one didn't have good eyesight, it was very likely that they would have overlooked Ji Yun's attack. Some people might even think that Ji Yun's attack was completely based on brute force and wasn't worth mentioning at all, because this was also the most physical waste. Any clansman who had received strict training from the clan would not attack wherever he thought of it. However, it was precisely because of this that the enemy would easily overlook Ji Yun's existence. Leng Ruoxue guessed that Ji Yun's nickname of coward must have originated from this. Although she didn't know the Ji family's motive for doing this, she was certain that it was to protect Ji Yun. Just as Leng Ruoxue was watching Ji Yun and the other three beat up Lu Sen, who had heard Leng Ruoxue's words, couldn't help but turn his head to see if she was lying. However, who knew that it would be better if he didn't look? The moment he looked, he instantly felt a loud boom in his head. Blood began to rush to his head, his vision turned white, and his head began to spin. How could this be? At this moment, Ji Yun and the other three took advantage of the opportunity and attacked at the same time. Fierce wind, floating water, and scorching fire interweaved together to create a beautiful scene and smashed towards Lu Sen with a bang. With a loud sound, Lu Sen fell to the ground. Lu Sen, who had fallen to the ground, was not completely unconscious, but he felt his whole body was sore and weak, as if he had been crushed by a heavy object, and his bones seemed to be about to break. How? How could this be possible? When did he become so weak? For God-tier masters actually managed to injure him. Although it was a challenge for him to fight 1 against 4, he was relieved after fighting with the other party because he quickly tested the strength of the other party. Therefore, the more he fought, the more confident he was in his victory. But who knew that in a situation where he could clearly win, there was a big reversal. He had lost. And he lost in such an unclear way. Yes. He couldn't understand. He shouldn't have lost, but in the end, not only did he lose the victory he thought he would win, but his good friend's condition seemed to be worse than his. However, he wouldn't think that way very soon. After Lu Sen fell to the ground, Baby and Richard swaggered to his side and looked to the left and right. They even nodded while looking at the two little beasts. Then, they heard Baby instruct Zhou Kun, "Zhou, carry this guy over there." The place it was pointing at was where the young man was. Oh! Knowing that the little fox was terrifying, Zhou Kun did not dare to be negligent at all. He hurriedly dragged Lu Sen to the young man's side and put him down. Strip him of his clothes. Baby continued to instruct. Chapter 1868, Allowing the Tiger to Return to the Mountain, 1, Upon hearing Baby's words, Zhou Kun was stunned. Did I hear wrongly? This little fox, who was not cute in his eyes, actually asked him to take off Lu Sen's clothes. What did it want to do? He didn't know why, but he suddenly had a very fearful feeling in his heart. What's wrong? Don't you understand human language? I'm telling you to take off his clothes. Seeing that Zhou Kun was in a daze, Baby said impatiently. It already disliked Zhou Kun, and now it hated him even more. Oh. I know. Yes. Zhou Kun replied without any backbone, but he couldn't help but feel disgusted in his heart. He was clearly not a human. What was he talking about? Did he not understand human language? This fox that he hated the most was really not in his heart. Zhou Kun then squatted down and placed his hand on Lu Sen's collar. He could clearly feel a fierce gaze staring at him. Zhou Kun looked in the direction of his senses and saw Lu Sen lying limply on the ground. He was glaring at him angrily and warning him with an obvious threatening look in his eyes. At that moment, Lu Sen's angry eyes were saying, "You dare to try taking off my clothes?" Upon seeing the threat, Zhou Kun was no longer afraid. He went all out and stripped Lu Sen naked in a few moves, making Lu Sen so angry that he was burning with anger. Unfortunately, he was completely ignored by the crowd. Done. After completing baby's instructions, Zhou Kun said again, staring at baby and waiting for its next instructions. As for Ji Yun and the other two, after seeing this situation, they all stared at the treasure without blinking. They were truly very curious as to what this little fox wanted to do. Then let's put him on this guy. The baby pointed at the young man and said. This time, the eyes that were staring at them were filled with more ruthlessness. Oh. Zhou Kun nodded, then lifted Zhou Kun's body and gestured. Finally, he made sure that the two of them were facing each other. This posture was a bit like the two of them were doing something intimate. This should be the little fox's intention, right? Because baby didn't say it clearly, he could only guess. Lu Sen and the young man, who had been placed together in such a humiliating position, were so angry that their faces turned green. At this moment, they could clearly feel each other's bodies. This fact made them even more furious. What was even more frightening was that there was a faint numbing sensation surging out of their bodies, which made them feel even more uneasy. Unfortunately, the two of them were now powerless and could not resist the other party's actions at all, which made them both ashamed and angry. Such a situation was definitely a tragedy for the two of them. After the two of them were placed face to face, it was a little difficult for them to stare at Zhou Kun and the others. Moreover, their mouths would touch if they were not careful. This forced the two of them to be more alert and careful. The young man was better. After all, he was placed under the blanket, so he didn't need to exert too much strength. However, Lu Sen was in a worse state. He had to try his best to straighten his neck to prevent them from touching each other. After a short while, his neck drooped involuntarily. Seeing this, the young man wanted to turn his head away and nod, but he found that he couldn't move at all. Moreover, the weight on his body was a little unbearable. Lu Sen was too heavy. But even so, it couldn't be compared to the humiliation of being pressed down by a man. And all of this was caused by these people. At this moment, he hated Leng Ruoxue and the others. Then, his and Lu Sen's lips met. Although the two were good friends, such an intimate action still made them feel so disgusted that they almost vomited. But now, the two could only stick their lips to each other like kissing fish because they were unable to move their heads away. Seeing this, Ji Yun and the other two couldn't help but widen their eyes. They thought to themselves, could this be the little fox's goal? It was too evil. As they thought about this, the three of them could not help but turn to look at their master, Leng Ruoxue. However, when they saw the calm expression on Leng Ruoxue's face, the three of them instantly felt that they were making a big fuss out of nothing. Then, they looked at the treasure. At this time, baby couldn't help but scream, the one surnamed Zhou. You're really too evil. How could you leave the two of them like this? This would cause a misunderstanding. Ayaya. I'm not even an adult yet. What should we do about this? After saying that, baby even covered his eyes as if he didn't dare to look at this scene that could cause people to have needle eyes. Upon hearing that, Zhou Kun almost fainted. Fuck. This was clearly the stinky fox's intention. It was actually trying to shirk its responsibility. This was preposterous. Zhou Kun was so angry that he was about to explode. Didn't you ask me to let them go like this? He asked. Did I? Did I tell you to place them face to face? Baby's beautiful and dazzling purple eyes were wide open as he said in disbelief. After saying this, baby's eyes turned to Ji Yun and the other two, asking for confirmation. Did I say that? No, I didn't. You just asked Zhou Kun to carry Lu Sen to the man. Ji Yun said honestly. He wasn't hitting someone when they were down. Baby did say that. Hence, he could only think that Zhou Kun had made the decision on his own and misunderstood him. You guys, their words made Zhou Kun so angry that he was tongue-tied. I say, Zhou Kun. Baby is still young, how could it think of leaving two men like this? Besides, we can all prove that this is the result of your own evil thoughts and not baby's intention. Ji Tao interrupted, trying hard not to laugh. Zhou-kun. You're really too. Ji Woo also opened his mouth to speak, but he deliberately only spoke half of his words. Don't blame him. It's normal for him to misunderstand me. He can't think of anything else except these things. Seeing that Ji Yun and the other two seemed to be blaming Zhou-kun, Baby quickly spoke up for him. However, Zhou-kun did not feel happy at all when he said that. On the other hand, Ji Yun and the other two were already laughing in their hearts. Ha ha ha. The treasure was really Zhou-kun's nemesis. Moreover, Zhou-kun couldn't do anything to the treasure at all. He couldn't hit it or scold it. Zhou-kun must have a headache. The three of them guessed. Zhou-kun felt extremely aggrieved when he saw that these people and an annoying fox had joined forces to bully him. He turned to Leng Ruoxue for help and said, "Young Miss Leng, your beastie is bullying me with them." Did I? Leng Ruoxue blinked her beautiful eyes as she spoke in an extremely pure manner. Placing the two of them like this was clearly your idea, but now it doesn't want to admit it. Zhou-kun complained with a faint sobbing tone in his voice, as if he had suffered great grievances. But I was there too. I didn't hear the treasurer say how to place these two people. Leng Ruoxue reminded him, but she couldn't help but laugh in her heart. Baby was her beastie. Even if Baby had done something wrong, she couldn't help an outsider. Besides, the baby did not say it clearly. Chapter 1869, Allowing the Tiger to Return to the Mountain, 2b. But that's what it means. Zhou-kun stammered a little. He did not expect that asking Leng Ruoxue for help would result in such an outcome, which he could not accept. Because in his heart, Leng Ruoxue should be speaking up for him. That's just your guess. Leng Ruoxue concluded the dispute between them with one sentence. He. You with the surname Zhou, what's the point of being so conflicted over this? You should be thinking about how to deal with these two. At this moment, Baby kindly reminded him. Kill them, of course. Zhou-kun said with a black face, and his entire body was exuding a cold aura. Since the two of them wanted to kill him, he couldn't blame them for giving them a taste of their own medicine. Let them go. Upon hearing Zhou-kun's words, Leng Ruoxue said indifferently. Why? They're going to kill us. Zhou-kun widened his eyes and looked at Leng Ruoxue in disbelief. He could not help but complain in his heart. What a woman. It was the benevolence of a woman. He was too soft-hearted. These two people were going to kill them, so how could they let the tiger return to the mountain? He didn't want to have someone secretly thinking about taking his life at all times, so he was not willing to leave these two alive. What else could it be? Of course, it's because I don't want you to live too carefreely. I just want to find you some fun. Leng Ruoxue thought to herself. Although the two of them also wanted to kill them, the cause was Zhou-kun after all. In order to protect themselves, they had no choice but to think of ways to deal with the two of them. It was also because of this that Zhou-kun was safe. However, it was precisely because Zhou-kun was fine that she felt extremely unbalanced. Logically speaking, it was only natural for Lu Sen to seek revenge on Zhou-kun for the things that he had done. If Lu Sen hadn't wanted to kill them as well, they might not have helped Zhou-kun. After all, Zhou-kun had brought this upon himself. If he hadn't played with women so shamelessly, why would his brother have wanted to kill him? Although she looked down on cowardly women who committed suicide for love, she also hated men who treated women as playthings. Therefore, she was displeased that they had indirectly helped Zhou-kun. Originally, Zhou-kun should have been punished, but he was fine now. As a woman, Leng Ruoxue felt that it was not worth it for the women he had toyed with. Naturally, she did not want him to have an easy life in the future. That was why she decided to let these two men off. If the two men were determined to kill her next time, she would naturally not be merciful. However, before that, she would give them a fair chance to take revenge on Zhou-kun. At the very least, she would not take their lives now. Everything that they had just experienced could be considered as compensation for her killing intent. After all, She was no pushover. Now, it all depended on whether these two were smart enough. She had given them the opportunity, but whether they could grasp it or not was entirely up to them. As for Ji Yun and the other two, although they did not understand why Leng Ruoxue would release Lu Sen and Lu Li, they did not object to it out of their trust in Leng Ruoxue. When Zhou Kun saw that Ji Yun and the others did not express their opinions, he said anxiously, "You guys should say something. Miss Leng wanted to let go of these two people. They are going to kill us. How can we let a tiger return to the mountain?" Zhou Kun. Ruoxue must have her reasons for making this decision. You should just accept it calmly. Ji Yun consoled her. In fact, he really wanted to say that it was useless for her to object to Ruoxue's decision. After all, Zhou Kun was considered to be alone among the few of them. Then what if they still come to kill us in the future? Zhou Kun said with a worried look on his face. As the saying goes, it's easy to dodge an open spear, but hard to defend against an arrow in the dark. There was always someone who wanted to kill him in the dark. Who could stand it? Since we're already here, let's take things as they are. We'll talk about the future later. Let them go now. Leng Ruoxue said indifferently. What if I strongly object? Zhou Kun asked loudly. Objection overruled. The majority rules. Leng Ruoxue replied matter-of-factly. But they didn't express their opinions. Zhou Kun reminded him. It's a silent agreement, understand? Leng Ruoxue was calm and composed. Unless they clearly state their position, I will never agree. Zhou Kun was exasperated. Now, he really felt that Leng Ruoxue was not an easy woman to manipulate. Her disobedience gave Zhou Kun a headache. No. He had to tame this unruly little wild cat. Otherwise, how could he regain his manliness in front of Leng Ruoxue in the future? He thought to himself that his thoughts had gone astray again. Since that's the case, you all should state your position. Leng Ruoxue looked towards Ji Yun and the other two. We have no objections. Well, listen to Ruoxue. Ji Yun hurriedly replied after hearing Leng Ruoxue's words. You've given up now. After Ji Yun finished speaking, Leng Ruoxue looked at Zhou Kun and asked. I still can't agree. Zhou Kun was shameless. Oh, really? Treasure. Since he doesn't agree, then you guys have fun with him. Until he agrees to it. Leng Ruoxue instructed with a smile that was not a smile. Hee. All right. Leave this to us. Baby answered with a smirk. Its shiny, beautiful purple eyes stared at Zhou Kun as if it was staring at its prey, making Zhou Kun's hair stand on end and his hair stand on end. Baby and Kun walked towards Zhou Kun step by step. With every step they took, Zhou Kun's heart sank a little. The two little beasts seemed to be deliberately torturing him and walked slowly on purpose. In this way, Zhou Kun felt even more stressed. What are you guys doing? Zhou Kun's face was pale, and he stuttered as he asked. He had seen how terrifying the little foxes were, so he did not want to be treated differently by them. Oh. That's really terrifying. What can we do? Don't be afraid, cute master told us to play with you. It's just a game, why are you shaking? Looking at Zhou Kun's body shaking non-stop like a fallen leaf in the autumn wind, the baby was helpless. Are they that terrifying? I don't want to play with you guys. Zhou Kun said with a look of horror on his face. If the outcome of their playing was the same as the young man's, he would never play with them even if he had to die. This is not easy. Cute master wants us to play with you, but you don't appreciate it. It seems that we can only use force. Buzz. Let's go. At baby's command, two meteors, one purple and one black, quickly flew towards Zhou Kun. Zhou Kun, who was unable to react in time, was pounced on by Baby and Yao. One of the two little fellows occupied Zhou Kun's head while the other occupied his upper body. Their 4 claws, which were shimmering with a cold light, kept flashing in front of Zhou Kun's eyes, causing him to be so frightened that he hurriedly shouted, "Don't. Stop playing, I agree." "I'll agree, alright." "Oh. What are you agreeing to?" Baby asked curiously, while its little claws were constantly rummaging through Zhou Kun's head. With a whoosh, its claws accidentally pulled out a lock of Zhou Kun's hair, causing Zhou Kun to grimace in pain. However, Zhou Kun did not dare to cry out loudly, for he was afraid that Baby would pull out all his hair. Woo-woo, it hurts. Chapter 1870, Allowing the Tiger to Return to the Mountain, 3, I'm sorry, I accidentally pulled off a lock of your hair. The treasure said again. There was a lot of locks in its mouth, and the part where Zhou Kun's hair had been pulled out had become bald. It doesn't matter. It's fine. Zhou Kun gritted his teeth in pain and could not help but feel uneasy. By the way, what did you say you agreed to? Baby continued to ask. Then, he accidentally pulled out a lock of Zhou Kun's hair on the top of his head, leaving him half bald. Yao Jian saw that his baby had already achieved something, so he was not to be outdone either. He slowly moved his sharp little claws up to Zhou Kun's chest and gestured a few times. Then, he began to move down and went straight to Zhou Kun's lower body. Feeling the chill in the important parts of his body, Zhou Kun's expression changed again and again, and his body trembled a few times. Boo, these two bad guys. How could he be so bad? He actually. Zhou Kun did not dare to move at all. He lowered his head and looked at the little black fox vigilantly. It had sharp claws. He was so close to becoming one of the eunuchs in the divine realm, just like the wretched man from before. Sob. I agree to let them go. Zhou Kun hurriedly shouted. Although his life was important, judging from the current situation, his life was more important. Otherwise, what fun would there be as a man? Moreover, he had truly understood the vileness and evil of these little foxes today. It was fine if they didn't make a move, but once they did, they would take a man's life. I really don't know why they are so hostile to men, woo. This is more like it. If only you had agreed earlier, I wouldn't have accidentally pulled off so much hair. I was just too anxious. Baby said with an apologetic face. This was the real act of taking advantage of others. It's okay, I don't blame you. Zhou Kun forced a smile and said that, but his heart was bleeding. You're still the most magnanimous. Baby touched Zhou Kun's bald head and praised him. After saying that, she left Zhou Kun's head. Seeing that his baby had already left, Yao naturally planned to leave as well. However, before he left, he kindly told Zhou Kun, I'm very good at cooking. If you don't want to be a man in the future, feel free to come to me. Don't stand on ceremony. I guarantee that the fees will be reasonable. After that, without waiting for Zhou Kun's reaction, she bounced back to Lin Ruoxu's side. Seeing the two little foxes' actions, Ji Yun and the other two were dumbfounded. These little foxes really had a lot of ways to scare people. However, it was fortunate that Zhou Kun was the one who was pranked. Otherwise, they would not be able to take it either. Seeing that Zhou Kun no longer objected, Lin Ruoxue walked directly to Lu Sen and the young man and said indifferently, I won't kill you. I'll let you go. Eat this. After saying that, she took out 2 pills and gestured for Ji Yun to give them to eat. But before that, her baby had already covered the 2 with Lu Sen's clothes, so as not to pollute her lovely master's eyes. The young man did not swallow the pill that Ji Yun had brought to his mouth. Instead, he looked at Lin Ruoxue and said with certainty, You drugged us? No wonder the 2 of them were so weak. It turned out that they had been tricked. However, when was this drug administered? Why didn't they feel anything at all? We had no choice, we were only trying to save our lives. Lin Ruoxue smiled faintly and did not deny it. May I know what kind of drug you gave us? The young man was a little curious and asked shamelessly. He was also very interested in alchemy, but unfortunately, his talent was not high enough to become an alchemist. At this moment, he was wholeheartedly seeking advice and had long forgotten about the humiliation that Leng Ruoxue and the others had caused them to suffer. We can't. Leng Ruoxue's rejection was very straightforward. Actually, she wasn't trying to be mysterious. It was just that the medicine was something that she had concocted casually and wasn't even worth mentioning. Oh. The young man's face was obviously disappointed. Seeing him like this, Lu Sen interrupted him impatiently. Why are you asking her all this nonsense? Lu Sen did not agree. After all, they were enemies. Then, Lu Sen glared at Leng Ruoxue with his bronze-like eyes and said, Woman, didn't your family teach you to eliminate your enemies by the roots and not let the tiger return to the mountain? He said this not to remind Leng Ruoxue not to release them, but because he was too curious. This was the education that the descendants of the clan had received since they were young. The elders in the clan had always warned them not to be soft-hearted and to not be soft-hearted towards their enemies. Otherwise, they would definitely bring endless trouble to themselves and their clan. Hence, Leng Ruoxue's current actions made him feel a little lost. Are you all considered my enemies? Leng Ruoxue's words were extremely confident. However, when Lu Sen and the young man heard it, it hurt their self-esteem. The two of them were god kings after all. Moreover, their strength was considered to be at the top among the god kings. However, Leng Ruoxue's words were like a slap to their faces. It turned out that the reason why she had let them off was because she did not take them seriously. The two of them were not worthy of being her enemies. How much confidence did he have? Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to say such words. The two of them had carefully sized up Leng Ruoxue for a long time. Other than realizing that she was more beautiful than all the other women they had seen, they didn't see anything special about her in terms of strength. This fact made the two of them even more depressed. After a long while. Even if you don't see us as enemies, you are my enemy in my eyes. So if you let me go, you will regret it, Lu Sen said. He was trying to goad Leng Ruoxue into paying attention to him, a potentially dangerous enemy. However, Leng Ruoxue would definitely disappoint him. Oh, really? Then I'll wait for you to come and take revenge, but next time, your little life will be with me. So, you'd better think clearly before you come. Leng Ruoxue said nonchalantly. Since she dared to let the tiger return to the mountain, there was no reason for her to be afraid. Furthermore, she was not someone who grew up in fear. I will. Lu Sen was so angry that he clenched his teeth. He had been completely defeated by Leng Ruoxue, and it had hurt his self-esteem. The two of them ate the pills that Ji Yun had given them and put on their clothes. They were about to leave, but before they left, Lu Sen warned Leng Ruoxue with a seemingly kind heart, although we've failed this time, there are many of Zhou Kun's enemies here. I hope you're lucky and don't encounter them. Lu Sen was gloating over Zhou Kun's misfortune. Moreover, he had also made up his mind that he would definitely tell Zhou Kun's whereabouts to his enemies by accident if he were to meet them. As for whether those people would take the opportunity to seek revenge on Zhou Kun, it was not something he could decide. And this woman would definitely regret letting the two of them go. This way, he would be able to feel at ease. Otherwise, how would he be able to survive in the immortal realm after being humiliated here? Only in this way would he be able to regain some face. Thank you for your warning. Leng Ruoxue said nonchalantly. She could clearly see through Lu Sen's thoughts and would not fall for it. Furthermore, even if she were to meet him, she was not afraid. After all, not everyone was like Lu Senator. As for the young man, he stared at Leng Ruoxue for a long time before he left. Finally, he sighed and said, I will come back for you. As for whether he had come back to seek revenge on Leng Ruoxue or for something else, he could not figure it out even after thinking about it for a long time. As they watched the two of them leave, Ji Yun and the others finally heaved a sigh of relief. This matter had finally come to a temporary end. As for whether the two of them would really come back to seek revenge, they couldn't care less now. Who asked them to trust Leng Ruoxue's decision? With the departure of Lu Sen and the young man, Zhou Kun appeared to be more and more vulnerable in front of Ji Yun and the others. Even so, he was still on tenterhooks, afraid that Ji Yun and the others would abandon him. If that happened, he would have no help in the event that he encountered such a situation again. Therefore, he, who was sensible, put himself in a very low position and even took note of everyone's expressions, especially the expressions of the little foxes, who were extremely hateful in his eyes. One afternoon, Leng Ruoxue and the rest had just finished their lunch and were about to return to their own tents to rest for a while. Suddenly, a familiar angry roar rang in their ears, "Zhou Kun! I've finally found you." Upon hearing this, Leng Ruoxue and the rest exchanged glances with each other. Their eyes were filled with helplessness. Lu Sen, that jinx. He was right. However, their location was likely to have been disclosed by Lu Senator. They were well aware of this. The person who came this time was also a divine king. His appearance, temperament, and other aspects were rather outstanding. He was considered a rare beauty. At least, from the looks of it, he was much stronger than Zhou Kun. However, they did not know if the person this time was a reasonable person who could distinguish between the right and wrong. Otherwise, they would probably have to help Zhou Kun. They really did not want to let Zhou Kun off so easily. It's actually the young master of the Yu family. Ji Wu asked in surprise when he saw the appearance of the person who spoke. You know him? Leng Ruoxue raised her brows and asked softly. There should be some reason for them to know each other, right?